Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today I am live streaming and I will be joined shortly by my friend and colleague Alex Amorosi. We are going to talk over the astrology of January with you today, and we'll go through the major transits of the month for January 2023, new year coming up, obviously. So that's kind of exciting. See what the first month of astrology has in store for us. And then after that, we're going to go through horoscopes for all 12 signs. So we're going to often you'll see me do a video on the astrology of the month, and then I do a separate video on the horoscopes. Today, we're just doing one happy live stream covering both. We're doing this in part as a way also of raising money for the Kickstarter. We're on the home stretch, last couple days of the Kickstarter right now. So I'll tell you about that and how to donate. We'll be sort of ringing the bell for that as we go. Yeah, tell me where you guys are coming in from. I'd love to hear it. And I'm going to, in the meantime, just run a little countdown video as people are logging in. We'll get a few more people in here before we get started. All right. Well, welcome in, everybody. I'd love to see where you guys are coming in from before I get started. Let's see here. We've got Michelle from Charleston, South Carolina. Hetty from Deep River. Hey. And let's see. We've got Karma on deck from St. George, Utah. You're a student in year one. That's awesome. I hope you're liking the program so far. And let's see. Trina. Hey, Trina. Good. It's so cool to see that you're here. Let's see, who else do we have coming in? Amy Lynn from Canada. Hello, Amy. Welcome. Let's see, where else are you guys coming from? Athens, Greece. Jeremy from Omaha, Nebraska. Astrofly from Dubai. And Sarah from England. Nice. Trina's from Milford. We got to represent Michigan. Let's see. Gladys from Virginia, Northern Virginia. Nice. Welcome. A bunch of people from Canada. That's awesome. And yeah, and you're Karma on deck say you're on to year two. Hell yeah, I'm enjoying it. Good, great. Year two is awesome. Everything, the programs as you deepen into them, in my opinion, get successively better. So I think you'll enjoy it. That's awesome. Vibini says, a wonderful seat by a real live fire in a pub in London. Hi. Oh my God, that sounds awesome. Well, I hope that you will enjoy this exploration of January's astrology near your cozy fire. Evelyn's in from Ireland. And Juanita from Kennesaw, Georgia. That's awesome. Cool. Well, welcome everybody. Like I said, today we're going to take a look at the astrology of January, and then we are going to be looking at January horoscopes for all 12 signs. This should be fun. I'm joined, as I have been the past few months, today by my friend Alex. I'm going to be calling him on in just a minute. But first, you guys know that I am in the midst of promoting my annual Kickstarter campaign. One of the reasons that we're doing this live cast today is to drum up support and enthusiasm here on the home stretch. We have just 3 days left to go in the Kickstarter. Right now, we are almost at 1,100 backers. Our goal is 1,600 by New Year's Eve at midnight. If you would like to donate to the Kickstarter, we could really use your support, and I will show you how to do that. It's in the description of this video. If you go to the description, you will find the link, but I'm also going to put it into the comments section. Here's the Kickstarter link. You'll see I'm putting it in the live stream chat box. You can also find the link to the Kickstarter. It'll say Kickstarter 2023 at the top of my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. If you click on that, you'll be taken over to the Kickstarter page. I'm going to take you over there right now so you can see what it looks like. And you'll see right here, we're at 1,092 backers. We are trying to get to 1,608. And that should land us in the range that we need to be financially in order to meet our biggest goal of the year, which is to create a reading service, an affordable or sort of need-based reading service, you could say, for people who otherwise couldn't afford an astrology reading. This is a service that we're really excited about. We have usually two goals. There's a base goal, which is like keep the lights on, try to meet a minimum that pays for the basic service of the year. And everything beyond that is usually applied to a stretch goal. The stretch goal this year is the creation of a donation-based reading clinic. We still need a lot of support to get there. So 1,092 backers. We need, let's see, I'm going to do a little quick math here. So we need 1,608. Quick math means me using a calculator. Let's see, 1,092. So we need 516 more backers prior to New Year's Eve. That's doable. Believe it or not, that's doable. A lot of the times it's the last 3 or 4 days that people really show up and say, hey, I love this channel. It is something that I listen to regularly. And so I am more than happy to throw in $5, $20, whatever I can. It all makes a big difference. You can also remember that half off all of my online programs. So if you're thinking of studying with me, or if you're in one of my classes but wanting to take year 2 or getting ready to take Horary, or if you want to bundle some of my programs together, there are 6 different programs that I offer. And the nice thing is that you can bundle them together through the Kickstarter. Any one program is already about 50% off. But if you bundle them together successively, then the cost of each program goes down even more. Most people who take my year 1 program will end up taking year 2 or Horary or Readings and Passages or the Masterclass series or something else that we offer. So it's a really good deal every year during the Kickstarter to pick up your classes through the Kickstarter. And we use some of that revenue in turn toward the projects that we're working on in the year ahead, as well as supporting the channel itself. So you can also pick up a lot of really cool rewards that are not, that aren't the classes. So for example, the Astrology of 2023 lecture, we've got 100 people who have pledged for that already. There are a variety of different talks that I do every year that are exclusive to the Kickstarter. There's a year ahead horoscope reading. So if you want a horoscope reading for your sun or rising sign for the entire year of 2023, I sell that through the Kickstarter when you donate. So we try to give some really cool rewards as a thank you gift for supporting us. And I'm going to put the link into the chat box one more time, and we'll pause a few times today during the live stream to mention the Kickstarter and how you do it. So it's, again, you can find it in the description of this video. You can go to my website, nightlightastrology.com, and you can click on the Kickstarter tab, and it will take you to the Kickstarter page. Or you can click on the links in the chat box. I don't know if it should allow you to click on the links that I'm putting into the live stream chat. But yeah, if it doesn't, just look at the description of the video or go to my website, nightlightastrology.com. Okay, well, thank you guys so much to everyone who's already donated. 1,092 backers as of the moment that I'm looking at this right now. Really, really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Okay, with that, let's bring on my friend and colleague, Alex Amorosi. Hey, Alex.
Hi, Adam. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. I'm excited to look at the first month of astrology in January. I think there's some big transits to start off the year that'll be good to talk about, and it's nice to have you back on to to do that with.
Thanks. I'm always excited to be here. This is always fun.
Yeah, if you guys don't know about Alex, you can find his work at alexamorosi.com or on Instagram, Alex Amorosi Healing. And Alex posts a lot of really fun astrology content on his Instagram account. You can book a reading with him on his website. Alex is an alumni of my programs. Anything you want to say about your experience in the programs to before we dive into the astrology?
I think taking your year 1 class is one of the best things I ever did, just for my enjoyment and love of astrology, my sort of love affair with astrology, but also to give me a solid ground on which to be able to feel comfortable practicing. One of the things I really love, of the many things I love about your program, Adam, is that it has a really solid curriculum that is extremely well thought through and gives you an enormously solid foundation in a lot of material with never feeling overwhelming. And even if you do, there's all these places you can go to. You can go to somebody to like really ask your questions and interact with your classmates. So I love that. And I'm taking right now, I always see an extra R, horary astrology, horary astrology, which I'm also loving too. I'm getting used to quadrant-based houses for horary. That's something that's just my own little Hellenistic astrologer mind.
Yeah, when you study natal astrology, my classes, you're using whole sign. When you study horary, you're using quadrant based, because a lot of the medieval astrologers use quadrant based. In case that doesn't make sense to anyone who's listening, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just went into geekland without realizing.
You're fine.
But but honestly, horary has. I find it in of itself really interesting, but it's really helped me with my practice of natal astrology too, especially in the way the symbols are used and the way the symbols come together. In horary, I have been applying the receptions and the different ways things that I've learned in horary to my natal practice, and that's been like life-changing.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're awesome classes. I love them.
Thank you. Thank you for the plug. I wanted Alex to just, mention his love of the programs to, if people are sitting on the fence and you have this really good deal sitting in front of you during the Kickstarter. I think Alex he's just been a great advocate for my programs and helping people find their way to good astrology content and creating good astrology content himself. So yeah, we'll appreciate that. Let's turn our attention now to the astrology of January. So we're going to start with an overview of the major transits of the month for everyone listening, and then we're going to go into horoscopes for all 12 signs. And in order to do that, let me just get my screen set up here. Okay, we're good. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And okay, good. Can you see it, Alex?
Yep, I got you.
Okay, sweet. So we're going to just go through, day by day, the major transits of January and just talk about what to expect. January 1st, the major transit that starts the month, and it's coming through. It sort of, I'll just back this up a little bit so you can actually see the, oops, here we go. All right, we're going to do this hour. I know, right? I know. It is just, that's exactly it. See, it's just past midnight East Coast time that the two planets conjoin. Wow. So it's like literally Happy New Year's, and you're kissing
you're existential.
You're kissing your special someone, and they turn into a monster right there on the dot. It's like reverse Beauty and the Beast. Totally. You kiss them and they turn into a monster. So, okay, so it's the first transit of the year. It's happening basically at midnight. It is Venus conjoined with Pluto. You start us off. I did a whole video today on Venus's conjunction with Pluto, so I feel like let me hand the responsibility of talking about this transit over to you first.
So I watched that video and I loved it because I was seeing so much that was happening in my own psyche. But I was out walking today and I realized I was getting really fixated on something from a relationship from the past. And I didn't know where it was coming from. And I'm like, why am I becoming fixated on this thing that happened? It was last year and blah, blah, blah. And I realized, I'm like, oh, it's Venus and Pluto. And that's one of the things I would say about Venus and Pluto can have a sort of fixating quality to it, a sort of pinpointing quality to it, a feeling like you're going over something or trying to glean like some kind of lesson from something. And Venus Pluto too often shows you sometimes where the darkness is that you can look at so you don't have to be afraid of it anymore. That's been something that really I found with Venus Pluto too. Like there's that sort of fixation that can happen, and it can turn into, in a more extreme sense, an obsession, but it also can show you like where you're getting hooked. Where are the shadow places where you're getting hooked in your psyche, particularly with Venus, like things around relationships and sex and beauty and art and all those sort of creative pursuits. And Pluto, that's Pluto's great gift, even though in the moment it doesn't often feel like a gift. It sort of shows you like we can bring this up to the surface. It doesn't have to be, there under the surface in the shadows scaring you anymore. So that came to me today and I was like, oh yeah, Venus and Pluto are conjunct.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a perfect, yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that will often pop up. Or it's like let's say you're in a relationship, your partner does something and it's a simple thing and you're like, I'm going to end it. You're like, wait, what? Why? What is that? Because they put their spoon down too loud or something. Like what is it? And then you realize it's this something's coming up from a deep place, and it's like, oh, I've been pushing something down, and now I have to deal with it. It's
Yeah.
not about the spoon; it's about some other pattern or whatever. So that can
Right.
definitely be a thing with Venus and Pluto coming together. One thing that I can't help but think about is the sequence taking place between January 1st and January 3rd. So if you push this forward just a little bit, after the conjunction with Pluto, on the 3rd, Venus enters Aquarius. And then on the next day, the 4th, Venus will go into a sextile with Jupiter. Now, Venus is an evening star where she is like royalty. Venus as an evening star has a very attractive um, quality as the evening star and is often also associated with wealth and good fortune in the evening star position. She preferred that position according to ancient astrologers, although her morning star position is powerful in its own right. But this is like Venus in, a fine, like, a $30,000 dress or something. Venus in her evening star position is very um, luxurious and beautiful and sort of fortunate. Well, she's coming off from a conjunction with a planet in Pluto whose name means riches, and then going immediately into a sextile with Jupiter, who was associated with abundance. And she's in this evening star position. I I can't help but wonder if this sequence does not point towards some kind of extravagance or some kind of something that would signify going to a Venusian extreme. It's okay. Let's just say, for example, New Year's Eve. I could see someone getting the idea to buy a $2,000 bottle of champagne on a whim, even though you absolutely can't afford it. You know what I mean? Like, not that
Right.
I've never done that in my entire life, but if,
You look at
not
your credit card statement on January 1st. Oh,
he's
shit.
like, holy, what have I done? But it's that kind of thing where it's like, let's do something really royal,
Yeah.
So I just wonder about riches, wealth, abundance, luxury, desire, kind of an extravagant sort of feast of Venus qualities around Pluto and Jupiter simultaneously.
Yeah, I think that too, and I think also the tempering quality of that is it's Venus and Aquarius, and it has that little bit more detached, rational quality of Aquarius with it too. But I also think like it could be also with Aquarius, let's do something royal and eclectic and eccentric and out of the box. That sort of idea, it's like it's a really interesting idea of Venus just coming into that sextile with Jupiter, who is all hopped up on the first degrees of Aries. That's a really impulsive go get, let's do it, Jupiter. So yeah, that is an interesting sequence going through that. But I think also with Aquarius too, Aquarians do have that ability to sort of step back if you can find that, if you feel yourself getting sucked into the royal rabbit hole. To be able to like step back from the more detached perspective can help with Aquarius too. That Venus is there.
Yeah, there's a little bit of objectivity. Venus is entering Saturn's sign. It won't be long before she's getting real heady and serious about something with Saturn. We're going to talk about
For
that
sure.
later. Comes a little bit later, though. But it's true, though. I mean, it's like Venus in a Saturn sign. The thing is that you could definitely go in the direction of Venus maybe having a little bit of objectivity. It's not like when Venus enters Pisces later in the month. I feel like that's when, every single one of us becomes our inner diva comes out, or it's just so like Venus just completely loses herself in Pisces. And I think in
Oh yeah.
mostly like really wonderful ways. Venus
Yeah.
in Capricorn with Pluto, I think it's a little bit more like oh my God, what are the shows where is it cabaret where they dance or no burlesque? Is that the name of the type of dancing? It's kind of Venus and Capricorn, heavy Plutonian feeling. Am I getting that right?
I don't know. I wouldn't know with burlesque. There's a little bit more. I think burlesque has a little bit more of like a comedic aspect, or there's like a little
Yeah.
bit of a more lighthearted.
Is it okay? What am I
There's a
thinking of?
sometimes satirical, I think, in burlesque. There's like a satirical quality, which might be the Saturn.
This is what I'm thinking of right here. I'm going to show you a picture that comes to my mind. I looked up the word burlesque, and to me, this is like very Venus in Capricorn. Let me just see if I can. Hold on. I'm going to put this up so you can see it and tell me if you think this is Venus in Capricorn. Can you see that?
The one on the right?
The one on the right in the red dress right here.
Yeah.
Like, I just looked up burlesque dancing, and to me, all of these are very Venus and Capricorn vibes. What do you think? Venus, Pluto, and Capricorn.
Venus, I was going to say Venus and Pluto for sure. There's like a, you know, what's interesting about Venus and Pluto in an earth sign is like, there's often, and maybe this is particular with Capricorn and Virgo, you could make the argument for Taurus, I think too, is there's often a sense of needing to hold oneself under control, to be sort of like good and right and achieve and whatever. And Pluto sort of shows you, you know, the under the surface, like, where does my bad side want to come out in a good way? You know, like, where is an authentic desire within me that's not being expressed, that I'm sort of suppressing in the name of living up to somebody else's expectation or my own expectation of myself? And Pluto kind of brings that quality of like, you can bring out your darkness too. You're not hurt, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else. There's a authentic freedom, I think, in Virgo and Capricorn particularly, that wants to be released.
Yeah.
In some way that Pluto helps to do.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's something about Venus and what is the name of it? There's a type of photography that women will take, or really anyone. But I mean, what I'm used to is, and they'll often do it for themselves. And I had an ex-girlfriend who did it one time when I was living in New York City, and it was basically like pictures like. So this was just purely for herself. It wasn't something she shared with anyone, but it was just like a woman who specialized in taking photographs of women like in lingerie just for themselves. And this was a whole thing that she did. And mostly it wasn't being published or shared on social media or anything. And there was a name for it, and I can't remember.
Boudoir?
Yes, that's it. That's it. What does that mean? What does that word mean? Now I want to know. Should we look it up?
I feel like not that I know, I'm going to do Professor Sag here, but I think it means bedroom. Does it mean bedroom?
Let's see, hold on. Okay, I'm looking up the etymology. A room where a lady may retire to be alone or receive her intimate friends. Oh, literally a pouting room, to pout or sulk. That's really interesting because what I really like about that is that I remember the woman that I was dating for a while in New York City, who I'm still friends with to this day. But for her, like, it was very much just something that she, like, you having your own, I guess, like your own study or your own office, your own bedroom before you're married or something. It's just like something that she was explaining is like, this is just for me. And I was really fascinating. Like, as a guy, like, it never would occur to me to like do something like that, you know. But anyway, I'm probably sounding like a real idiot at this point, so I'm going to shut up. But anyway, I thought that's a very Venus, Pluto, and Capricorn kind of dynamic, because Venus and Capricorn in a Saturn ruled sign can be about something that's distant or remote or isolated or private, yet intense and sexual, which is why, for example, today in my video, I talked a lot about the need to have secrets that you keep.
Absolutely.
Some things that are just yours, they're just for you. And they're like dark and rich. It could be a transgression, it could be a joy, it could be a pleasure, but it's just something that's yours. And that's why I was thinking of that photography.
Well, you said so well too, Adam, and just kind of riffing off that is like, there's certain things you hold for yourself because they hold and gain power as you hold them within yourself. If you speak of them or bring them out to the wrong people, it's like the power diffuses, the riches get diffused to others when you want to hold that tight and let it radiate out from within you. That kind of idea with a secret.
Yeah, totally. I think that's perfect. Yeah. So anyway, hopefully we're describing for all of you some Venus and Capricorn vibes. I feel like Venus and Aquarius sextile Jupiter and Aries is a bit more like, I'm thinking a little bit more of like if my wife decided suddenly she wanted to get a crotch rocket. I feel like sort of eccentric and but like super young but feminine all at once. Like I think my wife would look pretty hot on a crotch rocket blazing around. I wouldn't want her to because I think they're dangerous. But I mean, it's like it feels like Venus moves from kind of sultry and dark and earthy and Capricornian, like so I'm gonna give you another TMI, but sometimes my wife has a few girlfriends. We were sitting around the fire last summer and they were they were talking about when they get their periods, and she goes, isn't there just like sometimes when you get your periods where you just want to go out into the woods and just sit on the earth and bleed and just fuck everyone? I just want to. My wife's an herbalist, okay, so this is probably why she's thinking of this. And I was like, yeah, that's Venus and Pluto and Capricorn though. To me, it's like it has an edgy, dark, earthy vibe to it. Very earth goddess and maybe a little bit of destroyer energy. But then you get if you put Venus in Aquarius sextile to Jupiter, it feels a little bit more like if a really cool woman took over Twitter and kicked Elon Musk out or something.
Right. One can dream. One can dream. For that headline, as this happens.
Yeah. So, oh my God. Anyway, so I hope you guys are entertained by our. See, this is the good thing. I'm drinking a little bit of iced tea, black iced tea, so it has caffeine in it. So I'm just gonna keep. I'm getting on my metaphorical crotch rocket as we speak.
That of anything I never expected to hear with that sextile, it was that, but that describes it. There you go.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So there's some excitement from Venus early in the month, the 1st through the 4th. Watch for the Venusian vibes to be pretty strong. Makes sense. Venus just appeared as an evening star. She brought forth the eclipse energy. It's been the Venus show here in December. A lot of it has been. So I think that's it's just really fascinating to see that in the start of January, Venus is off to the races.
Yeah. Sure.
All right, let's see here. So, and thank you to people who are doing us the favor of explaining, translating. Someone in the chat box what is a crotch rocket? This sounds. You're
I'm actually glad that was defined too, because for a second I was like a.
Is that wow, you've never heard of a crotch? You know what a crotch rocket is? You don't?
No.
Oh my God. Okay.
No, I'd never heard of that. So my first place it went to, because it's a crotch, I was like, wow. Okay, we're really taking it there on YouTube Live today.
Oh my God, no. Okay, hold on. Now I have to show you one so that you can, and people don't think I'm crazy too. Let's see here. Okay, this is a good one. I've got some pictures, and no, wait, no. Where's the images? Here we go. Okay, I'm just gonna show you the Google image search for a crotch rocket. Those are crotch rockets. They're not they're like motorcycles, but they're the kind where people are they're going really, really fast, super fast.
That was something Britney Spears was riding one in her Toxic video. I totally remember that. There's a really famous shot of her going like this on a motorcycle.
Right, right.
Yeah.
As opposed to this, which to me, this also. To me, these are pretty cool too. If I were going to drive a motorcycle, a lowrider might be cool too. Have you ever heard of those?
Mm-hmm. I know nothing about.
You get kind of like this thing. It's kind of like that. They're kind of like a deep.
Oh yeah, I've seen those around. Yeah.
Those are kind of cool. Anyway, okay, now we're totally off on a crazy tangent. This is
Venus and Aquarius took us over.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, speaking of eccentric vibes, on January 5th, let's put the Sun trine Uranus up on the screen and start talking about that. So January 5th, the Sun trines Uranus, and here we go. You can see it coming through the trine there on Thursday, January 5th. Now, to me, anytime that the Sun and Uranus are in a trine together, there are two things that I experience personally. I wrote these down. One is a ridiculous and completely unrealistic amount of confidence. It just it could be, I will have an idea, or it may not even be an idea. I'll just be like, I'll listen to music like, like I'm 18, like just blasting music and like, yes, I've got all of the answers and everything's rolling. And it feels like it's like the universe is giving you a hit of adrenaline or something, and but completely off base in terms of what you think you'll get done or what will come of it. And by the next day, I'm like, oh, can we do that again?
Yeah.
But nothing really comes of it. Or the second thing is that I find that I will have really novel ideas. Usually it's like something I'm going to teach or changing my curriculum or an insight about astrology, because that's where my head's at all the time. But it'll be like problem solving or like light bulb moments, epiphanies, and sort of breakthroughs, insights that are really important. Maybe if I have a therapy session on the day of a Sun Uranus trine, I might have like a breakthrough that day. Those are the kind of things that I'm used to. What do you think about Sun Uranus?
Oh, it's one of my favorite aspects, especially because I think when, there can be like the seriousness of Capricorn season. I've got to, get nose to the grindstone sort of feeling. Uranus just brings a really good feeling of just like, F it, try this, F it, try this. Like I always kind of, I have a lot of aspects in my own life where I notice that I can get very bogged down in detail. And Uranus coming along with the trine to the sun is just kind of just like, well, what about this? Well, what about this? Well, what about this? Did you ever consider this? Did you ever look at it from this framework? And because it's a trine, it flows really easily. Sometimes, like you said, you can think like you have come up with the answer to all the world's problems. Like you're just like, oh my God, I have found the thing. And then you wake up the next morning, you're like, that wasn't the thing. That wasn't, it seems like the thing. I'm glad I just kept that in my journal and didn't actually put that out there in the world. But it's actually one of my favorite aspects, Sun trine Uranus. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the nice thing about this Sun trine Uranus is that it's happening during the midst of a Mercury retrograde. So if we look forward just a little bit, there's just 2 days later, we're going through two things really simultaneously. We'll just do them in order rather than skipping. On January 6th, the next day, there is then a full moon in Cancer. So the full moon in Cancer is coming through as the sun is just moving through the trine with Uranus. And then if we take it forward one more day into the 7th, then we have Mercury moving into the heart of the sun through what we call a cazimi. So that's quite a sequence. You've got the Sun trine Uranus, the full moon in Cancer, and Mercury cazimi 3 days in a row. And so that's the first 7 days of January. If you're taking all of that, it's Venus conjoined Pluto. We didn't even talk about Mercury sextile Neptune, which happens on the 2nd, but also Venus into Aquarius, Venus sextile Jupiter, and then it's the sequence Sun trine Uranus, which we just talked about, the full moon in Cancer, and then Mercury cazimi. So I want to hear, before I start blabbing on again, because God knows where I'll end up, why don't you say a few things about this sequence, and maybe how would you put those three things together?
Oh man. I think first of all, just on an elemental level, it's really nice to have this full moon in Cancer where there's a lot of air and earth this month. There's a lot of sort of cerebral, practical energy this month. It's nice to have this lovely, emotional, watery, nurturing moon in Cancer. I think, one of the things you can get really locked into with, if we're just looking at Sun Uranus, you could get into this sort of like practical, amazing ideas that just are kind of flowing out of you. But the full moon in Cancer brings that wonderful, emotional, nurturing, slower element to it. Like, yeah, these could be really amazing ideas. They could be very practical. They could be very sort of productive. But does it have a care behind it? Does it have a nurture behind it? Does it have a sense of sort of wrapping you up and also creating that like proverbial sense of home or belonging? That's kind of how I would start to fit all those archetypes together in that sequence. Plus Mercury too. You're getting Mercury refreshed the next day. under the beams of the sun, where the mental processes go through a sort of reconfiguration during the retrograde cycle. It's a really interesting sequence.
Yeah, it is an interesting sequence. I'm one of the things that comes to my mind is hold on just one second. All right, so if it starts with, excuse me, if it starts with the sun trining Uranus, one of the things that comes to my mind is the feeling of I'm ready to go beyond a limit, especially the sun in a Saturn ruled sign trining Uranus. It just has the feeling of maybe through hard work and determination, sort of Capricornian qualities, I can go beyond a limit. I can surpass it. Now, that could be a good thing. That could be hubris speaking. It sort of depends on the situation. But then let's imagine that the next day you get the full moon in Cancer. The full moon in Cancer gives that, like you said, there's an emotional check-in. It's like, okay, well, can your body, can your emotions, can your family, can you handle it, or can the environment around you support it? Will you make yourself sick, or will you go too far somehow? So it feels like this. If I feel like Capricorn and Uranus in a trine, and an Earth trine will like, well, let's climb the mountain. Let's do it,
Right.
and nothing's going to hold us back, except for you're going to bulldoze your family time, or you're going to. These are the things that I think of because of my reality, right? But so the Cancer full moon might give some kind of gut check about the viability of the situation in a more human, more emotional way. And I think I'm sort of repeating what you said. Then,
no, absolutely. Yeah. I was just thinking, Adam, too, about security. Too. One of the things I often find with Cancer too is just like, do you have a feeling of safety around you with it? Uranus and the sun can be like, wow, like, let's just go dirt biking in the Grand Canyon, like just, whatever. It's like, yeah, but do you have to ride a dirt bike? Could you just hike? Like the moon in Cancer is just like, like, could you just look at it and then go home? Stand there and look at it. There's a little bit more of that, like, that nice sense of like, yeah, well, like, okay, let's just double check that with a sense of feeling secure and safe and contained. That sorts of Cancer.
Yeah. I think the Cazimi then at the end, that's interesting because whatever the full moon might bring in as, let's call it like an emotional gut check, because oppositions will bring up polarities. So whatever the sun is on about, the reason that we're saying it'll get checked by the moon and the full moon in Cancer is because that full moon is in a polar opposite place. And so whatever the sun and Uranus are trying to do, probably something original, inventive, surpass a limit, do something that sort of, it has a kind of heroic, ambitious quality. The moon will give a gut check, an emotional check, a family check, something like that from the opposite end. Then Mercury comes through with the Cazimi, and that makes me feel like maybe you delegate something. Maybe you come up with a compromise. I mean, Mercury at the heart of the sun, it so many times will be about the synthesizing of something, because it's a rebirth moment for Mercury. It's as though Mercury's being infused with the archetypal energy of the sun, and it's then going to be reborn as a morning star. So maybe there's a change of mind that's happening between the trine and the full moon and the Cazimi. Like I'm going to do this thing. There's a check, and then a compromise or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I wholeheartedly agree. I think that the Mercury Cazimis are always, whenever there's a sort of, whenever it's that midpoint of the retrograde cycle and any of the cycles, I often think of like, that's the moment where you can see the way forward. Right. And exactly what you said, right? It's like, now I might change my mind and it might be tempered a little bit with those ideas, but at least I can see, if I can't actually get there yet, the fog is clearing and I'm starting to see the way I'm going to do this in the modified way the retrograde is asking me to do it.
Right. And this would make sense given that right after the Cazimi and the full moon, Mercury then through its retrograde hits the trine to Uranus on the 8th. And so it does look like when you have this powerful trine, series of trines between the Sun, Mercury, and Uranus, those are usually like progress, problem solving, excitement, charisma. It's very dynamic, and it's usually about strategy, a change of mind, getting excited about something you want to learn, being empowered in speech. It has all of those qualities to it. It's a lot about ambition with the Sun. So it's as though you're not, those things aren't going to get derailed, but the full moon does mark this point of like, whatever you think you're off to the races with, you're going to get this big emotional check from the full moon. I think that's really important. For example, how many times does this happen in my practice? I can't even, it feels like it's so predictable. Someone is going through a Sun Uranus dynamic in their birth chart, like Uranus is trining, squaring, opposing, conjoining their Sun. They'll be going through a personal breakthrough in their life. Their ambition is being clarified. They're surpassing old limits, and self-doubts are being washed away. And it's like really exciting time for people. It's one of my favorite transits to talk to people about because people like it. You know, it's like, I don't have to sit there and talk to them about a Saturn transit. So that's always a bonus. But then it's like clockwork. As they're having a breakthrough, there will be a regressive pull from their mom or their drug addict brother, or like do you know what I mean? Like there'll be something that like says, no, you can't grow. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. Or you can't grow because you're going to leave me behind, and it'll often be from the realm of the family.
It's so funny you said, you know, I think you and I might have talked about this before in a previous video, but every yoga teacher training that I've ever taught for 15 years, the second or third weekend, somebody will ask, and I'm not kidding, this happens every one, you know, I'm doing this training and I'm finding these whole new way of being, this whole new way of exploring the world, and my partner doesn't like it, or my mom's having trouble with it, or so-and-so. It is like, just like you said in your practice, like for me in trainings, that was like clockwork. It's that same sort of idea. And it's I think of the Sun Uranus, we would say in yoga terms, as a handstand moment. It's the first time someone does a pose they never thought they could do, or they take a training and they never thought they could do it. And it expands out all of a sudden what's possible. And then there can feel that like, but don't leave me behind, or this doesn't feel familiar anymore. You don't feel familiar anymore because you've gone in this radically new direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's just it's uncanny. It's like, I'm having this personal breakthrough, and suddenly, you know, my spouse is telling me that they like other women or something. And you're like, why, when I'm having a breakthrough, do you have to turn into Freddie? You know what I mean? You know, but it happens. It happens. Well, let's go to January 9th. That sequence is, remember, that's the Sun trine Uranus on January 5th, January 6th, the full moon in Cancer, January 7th, Mercury cazimi, and January 8th, Mercury trine Uranus. So between the 5th and the 8th, you have a power house of transits, just like a power-packed sequence there. Now, January 9th, Venus goes into a trine with Mars, which is very interesting because on the 9th, Venus trines Mars. The 11th and 12th, Mars stations and turns direct after its long retrograde in Gemini. This feels like another moment of completion, that something is, it feels nice that Venus is sort of trining Mars as Mars makes this turnaround. That feels auspicious. It feels like maybe whatever we have needed to learn or grow through, whatever the Mars retrograde has been about. Look at that whole sign house of Gemini in your birth chart. Whatever transformation has been taking place there since late October, it's nice that the goddess of good fortune is sort of touching Mars with a fortunate Jupiterian trine. Trines of the nature of Jupiter, right as Mars is changing directions. Feels like maybe there's a sort of like a positive resolution to something.
Absolutely. And, you know, the other thing too is Venus in the superior position, exerting her presence and force on Mars. She's in the dominant position. And I think that it's really nice for Mars to get that sort of beautiful little trine from Venus on his way out of retrograde. But also I was thinking, like, this is a very eclectic, playful, fun, cerebral matching of wits type of trine, I would think, between Aquarius and Gemini. You know, like there's a very sort of like offbeat, fun, kind of quality to it too. That's, you know, kind of on the level of ideas and in the air signs, you know, in the level of ideals and in the more cerebral areas of intellect and stuff like that. But yeah, I think this is a really nice way for Mars to begin to turn around, which has been at times a really challenging retrograde, especially at the beginning with the squares to Neptune.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's say that you have been in the process of trying to redo something. Let's say it's been in your career house because you're a Virgo rising, for example, which would put the Mars retrograde in your 10th. It feels like this would be a moment where, you know, whatever you've been trying to do, you're like, let's say you've been trying to redesign the approach that you have to meeting your goals at work or something, like quarterly goals or something. Venus trining Mars as Mars stations and turns direct could be like the period of trying to implement something new is now paying off, right? So you're starting to reap the benefits of having taken the time to revise and completely change the way that you're doing something. And now you're starting to see the first benefits, or you show it to your boss and your boss goes, wow, that was really innovative. Good job. Yeah, let's use that approach or something. I'm just making this up, but obviously the idea is that it's a very fortunate trine from, and as you said, Venus in the superior position, sort of exerting her presence, her energy over Mars as Mars turns direct. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the best things you could ask for, given that, you know, anytime that a planet stations, it can often feel like a very critical turning point. And when a malefic is stationing, whether it's turning direct or retrograde, they're usually turning retrograde, it's harder. But turning direct, you'll often see the signs of something recovering. So when a malefic is turning direct, you'll often see something starting to get better, and then it's being blessed by this kind of trine from Venus. So that feels like you could see things getting better around this time, especially in that whole sign house of Gemini.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So January 11th and 12th, Mars stations and turns direct. January 14th, and again, look at how prominent Venus is this month. I mean, it's the Venus show. So, oh, by the way, before we go any further, I just want to note this comment from Tiffany Hayden. Adam, you are so correct about burlesque is Venus in Capricorn. I've been a burlesque dancer at the highest traveling level for 15 years, and I'm a Venus in Capricorn. Whoop, whoop. Yeah, I knew it. I mean, I don't know if there's probably like lots of different types of dancing that could be Venus in lots of different types of art that Venus and Capricorn could represent, but like that one came to my mind. So I'm glad to hear that at least one person out there is
that's
Venus.
awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty
so
cool. Let's see here. Okay, so let's go on to Venus square Uranus. On January 14th, Venus will go through the square to Uranus. So Venus in Aquarius square Uranus and Taurus. I don't usually look at reception from outer planets, but the fact that Venus is squaring Uranus in Venus's sign to me is relevant here, because this is yet another, anytime that Venus goes through the squares, oppositions, or conjunctions with Uranus and Taurus, I feel like you get these really sparkly, like radical Venusian breakthroughs. It's almost like Uranus, the god of freedom, revolution, etc., already doing very Venusian things, but it becomes so powerfully Venusian when Venus hits those squares, oppositions, or conjunctions, since Uranus has been in Taurus, dating back to like May of 2018. So this is another one of those moments where Venus is squaring Uranus in Taurus, a Venus-ruled sign, and I think we could expect to see themes of whether it's aesthetic, it's sexual, it's rooted in your appearance or your wardrobe or your style, or it's in relationships. You're going to see those moments of greater independence, freedom, revolution, and inventiveness, and the need to be free and to break out of anything that feels constricting. So those are the main things that I would watch for. How would you talk about Venus and Uranus together?
Well, from these signs too, I was just thinking all of that. And I mean, I hate to use the cliche of creative because that's such a broad word, but when you have Venus in Aquarius, squaring Uranus and Taurus. Like I could see like an artist who has felt frustrated with their style for a really long time, getting a sudden reinvention of like, oh, actually I want to go in this direction, or actually, you know, I have this brand new idea of how I want to create, or the type of painting I want to do, or sculpt, or music I want to write. That there's often with Venus hard aspects to Uranus, I found, and I love that you're mentioning the reception here too, Adam. I haven't been thinking about that a lot, but it makes a lot of sense. There's a need to be free from an old container of some sort that has served its purpose. And there's often like an impulse to immediately jump to a new free way of being creatively. I'm just thinking a lot about art here, just because I could see someone with a lot of, you know, an Aquarian, like, kind of out of the box, Promethean, this is going to better something. This is going to serve more. This is going to bring something new to people type of idea. You've got those two very Promethean ideas of Aquarius and Uranus in contact with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. If someone has taken some, how do you say it? Boudoir? Is that how you say it?
Boudoir.
Boudoir? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
If someone did take those pictures and decided, well, screw this being just for me, I'm gonna fly my flag. I'm gonna show the world how beautiful and sexy and confident I am. It would happen while Venus was square to Uranus. Like it would be like the moment where you would be like, you know what, this isn't so private. I don't give a damn what people think, and I'm gonna put it on my homepage. I don't care if my Aunt Betty sees it. You know, I'm just like
billboard in Times Square. Put it up.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
It has that, like, you know, if you've got something that is beautiful and attractive, you know, puff it out like the peacock tail. It's like just put it out there for people to see. Be your brilliant, flaming, weirdo, amazing self. You know, just
right.
And I think being irreverent is a Venus Uranus thing too, where it's like, you know, oh God, you know, did you ever see, there was a movie, what was it called? It was called The Dangerous Lives of Altar Boys. Did you ever see that movie?
No.
Fantastic. No. I think it came out when I was in like high school. And I think it might have been with Macaulay Culkin's, what's his younger brother's name?
Rory Culkin?
No, it's the other one. Oh, I can't remember his name. Anyway, so it was one of his brothers. I think, no, I can't remember it. But anyway. But anyway, this movie is a lot. There's many ways in which it is a Venus Uranus movie. In the movie, they call on that poem from William Blake, Tiger. Do you know that? Or Tiger, is it Tiger, burning bright? Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know that poem?
No, but I'm like, is Kieran Culkin, by the way? Was that the other one? Kieran Culkin?
Yes, it's called The Tiger by William Blake, and here's how it goes. Okay, Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dead grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Isn't that beautiful?
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite poems of all. And you know, of course, William Blake is a genius. But I mean, that the thing about that's very Venus Uranus to me, and that poem plays a big role in the movie The Dangerous Lives of Altar Boys, which in part is about this irreverent tendency that these kids have to make and draw comic books during their Catholic school. And that poem ends up playing a big role as well. But it's sort of that their irreverence in that movie, their youthful irreverence toward religion, toward the nuns, toward Catholic school, is sort of progressively being compared to the um, the beauty of the tiger in William Blake's poem. It's this terrible beast, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
so beautiful. It's like it's beautiful and terrible at the same time. Venus square Uranus is like that. Why is it that Venus square Uranus causes people to want to break things that are sort of conventionally beautiful? Because they're looking for that fearful symmetry. They're looking for the thing that is beautiful but somehow edgy or deadly or uh, unconventional or even marginalized somehow. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so it's the altar boys drawing dirty comic books in Catholic school. That's Venus Uranus. So whatever it is, I think it's interesting that Venus is going through conjunction with Pluto at the beginning of the month, and then later in the month we get to January mid month, and Venus is squaring Uranus. It's a very powerful Venusian month.
Oh, absolutely. And then she's going to go, which we'll get to. She'll go to Saturn too. She's really getting like not going through this incredible journey of the outer planets this month.
Mm-hmm.
The,
Yeah.
You know,
and there's more too. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the Saturn dynamic yet, but and it's Kieran Culkin. You said that too, so someone's confirming it for us. All right, that's cool. Good.
I
Good.
forgot about Kieran Culkin. I always remember Rory Culkin.
Yeah, yeah. January 17th and 18th, Mercury stations to turn direct in Capricorn. So you can look at that whole sign house of Capricorn in your birth chart and get a pretty good feel for where the story is shifting. It has been a lot of emphasis on the house of Capricorn in your birth chart, and Mercury finishing its work in that house might give a sense of relief, especially if you've been stuck on something or there's been a more serious or heavy level of thinking or communication going on around something. You might notice that things start to lighten up or you feel like you're reaching a place of conclusion. It's interesting to me that Mercury is turning direct just very shortly after Mars is turning direct. Because Mars is retrograde or had been retrograde in Mercury's sign, I wonder if the full sort of conclusion of that Mars retrograde happens more like the 17th, 18th of the month when you see, sorry, here we go. Here's the station. When you see Mercury turning direct.
I was thinking about like when you're trying to start a lawnmower, you're like that sort of idea. Like I feel like that might feel what it's like when Mars is stationing. Like it feels like, okay, whatever Mars, the will that has been in checked or unable to move forward wants to move forward, and the motor is trying to start, but it doesn't like start the lawnmower until Mercury moves. I was thinking that when I was looking at this sequence for this month. It's also by that, and then when Uranus moves direct, we do get everybody moving direct for a little while, like all the planets moving direct. And there has been such a period of retrogrades and going backwards and going over things and reviewing. I've been even saying this to clients, like I said, I think the real forward motion of 2023 begins towards the end of January as we get towards the Aquarius new moon. Like the Lunar New Year this year really feels like the new year of where we're going in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. I think someone asked while you were going, I was born with Sun trine Uranus. Does it express in the same way that we were describing? I would say yes. I mean, not all at once every single day, but you're going to see that those themes we were talking about with Sun Uranus as applicable themes for your own psychology, for sure. Anything you want to add to that, Alex?
Yeah, I would say like, with this, that and you might see it with the sun representing the path of your life, your ambitions, your ideals, your intellects, like the unconventional journey, the desire to be free, I leading a life path where it's very off the beaten path in some way. That might all be ways that those things come together.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, yeah, usually you'll see it depends on the houses in the birth chart. It depends on the houses and the signs, but generally those themes.
Yeah, for sure. January 21st, we get a new moon in Aquarius. Let's see if I can get that. Here we go. So it's interesting because the 21st is a new moon in Aquarius, and the 22nd is Venus conjoining Saturn. So you get this big, oh, it had to come out. It had to come out. There's the big, fuck it.
The RuPaul circle. That's what I call it every time that happens.
I'm not gonna erase you. We were just talking about Venus and Uranus, and you wanted to appear, and I don't understand how or why, but here you are. We're not gonna take you. We're gonna leave you there. So yeah, so new moon new moon in Aquarius, and right after the new moon in Aquarius, the next day, Venus conjoins Saturn. So you could say that it is a new moon toned by a Venus-Saturn conjunction in the same sign. It's as though there's a new moon party happening in a house down the street, and on the roof of the house, there's a stargazing deck, and at the very top, Venus and Saturn are like locked in, in a serious eye gaze.
I just got some sort of Disney cartoon from that.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like the superhero on the roof, like, I'm not going to let you into that party. Like whatever.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. It could be like an evil stepmother trying to not let Cinderella out of the house. Like that actually kind of would make sense for Venus and Saturn.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we have look, I did it again. That's so interesting to me that it just does that sometimes. And I can't.
My favorite is the arrow is my favorite.
I gotta say. With a huge arrow. Okay, let's see here.
It always makes a statement.
Yeah, no, it does. Okay, so like if I do this, we'll see like this. It's coming for Alex. Okay. So
and if you take Adam's classes,
I know, right? You'll have such solid, undivided, productive classes. All right. The new moon is happening at the first degree of Aquarius, and the Venus-Saturn conjunction is at around 24 degrees of Aquarius. But they're co-present in the same house. So this is, by the way, the moon cycle, the start of the moon cycle that we're studying in my Roots and Spheres program. So we're taking a really hard look at this signature of the new moon around the Venus-Saturn conjunction in that program, and pairing that with our first plant teacher of the month in that new class that Ashley and I are teaching. I don't want to give all of what I have to say in that class away, right? But the one thing I will say is that it's, a new moon with a Venus-Saturn square to me would speak to a more deep, serious, heavier, weightier, but also more mature and possibly more valuable things around love and relationships, around sexuality, around what you value, what you desire, what you find attractive or what you don't, what you like or what you don't like. And these becoming very important pieces of the moon cycle ahead. The only thing that's a little curious here is that Aquarius could make all of that significantly more ideological or intellectual or sort of mental. And so I'm wondering how that might play out, that particular dimension of the new moon with Venus and Saturn. But I think the main thing that I want to stick with is that this new moon seems to present, we go from Venus being like really going through a lot of dynamic movement from Pluto to Uranus, right? And then the new moon comes through, and it's like Venus is now getting either checked by Saturn in maybe a way that's really hard or difficult, like like we were talking about a regressive pull when there's a breakthrough. Could there be something similar happening for Venus later in the month around this new moon? Or could it be that whatever breakthroughs Venus has been having, that she's now being met by the need to transform them from the excitement and inspiration period into a crystallization. Okay, now make this real now.
Yeah, and moving it forward too, right? That Aquarius idea of like, make it real and then move it. How are we going to move this forward? I was thinking that too, Adam, and kind of like Venus is going through this almost experimental period of going through the conjunction of Pluto and then the the trine to Uranus week. And I was just reading the comments, sorry.
Yeah.
And then Saturn sometimes in a very loving way can say, pick a lane. Pick a lane. You're doing all this experimenting. You've tried out these new things. You've gone through all of this, these ideas. And now, what do you want to commit to? Now, where do you want the more durable, longer lasting sort of tracks of this to bring you? I don't think Venus and Saturn, I think Venus, they don't always have to be a tough combo. They can be a tough combo, but I think they have they have a deep relationship to each other in the zodiac. And so there can be also a sense of like grounding that comes from this too, by having to make, constrict or make a choice or I just keep getting pick a lane, right? You've done all this experimenting. Now, which one do you want to commit to for the long lasting beneficial results?
Yeah. And I think that what happens as a result of this encounter, whether it's a difficult one or it's something that's refining, like you were saying, it's almost like Venus and Saturn coming together helps Venus to go from inspirational and visionary to more real, practical, having to make tough choices. But whatever happens, 4 days later, Venus enters her exaltation in Pisces.
And boy, is she happy to get there.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, totally, exactly. It's like, it's like, oh, thank God moment for Venus, having gone through.
Goes off the high dive.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I look at this and I go, Venus has now moved through this like encounter with Saturn, and whatever has happened, Venus is now exalted. So I just feel like Venus wins in the month of January. It's a thoroughly Venusian month in the sense of starts with the Pluto conjunction, ends with Venus in her exaltation. In the middle, there's a square to Uranus and then a conjunction with Saturn around a new moon. And then right after that new moon, you get Venus entering her exaltation, still as an evening star, sort of rising higher, gaining more luminosity and strength. For ancient astrologers was equivalent to luminosity and so forth. So it's just a month where I think that the Venus-Saturn moment is like maybe a little bit hard or getting real about something, but pretty shortly after that, Venus is really happy again. So it looks like a pretty nice sequence. And I would look, if people were like, well, practically, where do I look for this? I would look at that 3-house sequence from late Capricorn to Aquarius to Pisces and track out, especially probably Aquarius, tracking out the movement through that house and how Venus is going to be activating the topics of that whole sign house of Aquarius in your chart.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, it's like after that encounter with Saturn too, where there might be something that comes from that pick a lane moment where now Venus, I often think of like there's like a formula in rom-coms where like, there's all of a sudden there's a problem, like everything was going along great. And then there's a problem or a discovery or whatever. And then it actually winds up strengthening the relationship going forward. Like, as like that's Venus and, being held up in Pisces. Like this is the result of all of that train through Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, with Saturn being the last stop on the train track, so to speak.
Yeah. That's a great way of putting it. Okay. Well, we got through, there are a few other transits. I didn't get to every single transit of January, but we tried to kind of pick a narrative arc for the month. So hopefully might be a few other transits that I cover on YouTube in the month of January that we're not looking at here. What we would like to do next is, I think we will why don't we take like maybe we'll just take like a quick bathroom break. We'll come back. I'm going to leave the live stream going. We're going to take like maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes, something like that. We'll come back. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go Aries through Pisces horoscopes for January, just pulling out what we think maybe the key transit or two of the month is for every single rising sign. I know I've just been drinking a bunch of tea, so I'm going to use the bathroom really quick. Alex, if you need to as well, and then we'll just come back shortly.
All right, perfect. Got
All
some
right, we're
caffeine
back.
ready to go.
I know. I was like, oh, you know what? We're going into horoscopes. I'm going to need one more iced tea.
Now I got to put houses in there. I'm going to get some caffeine.
Let's see here. Let me get the screen set up for us.
While you're doing that, Adam, I just love that we end the story of Venus in January in Pisces. That feels really nice in conclusion of that story.
Yeah, exactly. It's I just made a video. I think it was like, I don't know, it was like 2 days ago, I think, and it was like why Venus is the star of 2023. And this is one of the reasons. Venus has this massive, really important retrograde over the summer where it's hitting those squares to Uranus again. But the year also starts off with the same thing. So you have these moments throughout the year where Venus is doing really important things and hitting Uranus at the same time. And it starts off that way in January. So those themes we're visiting now, you'll see them coming back in July and August again as well.
And even in a really interesting contrast, that she'll be in Leo at that time. So like you get the flip side of the equation of that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Where whatever's coming up now, in a sense, you're getting the polar opposite of over the summer, which is fascinating. Okay. Rena says, welcome back. Thank you. Thanks for hanging around, waiting for us.
Thanks, everyone. This is so fun doing this live.
I know.
It's really fun.
Let's see here. Oh, gosh. We've gone, about 10 people have submitted donations since we started. Before we get started with horoscopes now, I want to once again plug the Kickstarter. So I'm going to put the link to the Kickstarter in the chat box. There it is. We are now at 1,100 backers, which means we need exactly 508 before New Year's Eve. We've gone up like 300 backers in the past 48 hours. So people are waiting until the last moment and giving me a heart attack. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you. It's not life or death. It is. It's a great problem to have, to be hoping that we'll smash records and be able to build a donation-based reading clinic. I'm really fortunate to be stressed about something like this, honestly. But I want to take you over to the Kickstarter page and tell you what you can pick up. I'm going to run you through the rewards, and then Alex and I will dive into horoscopes. So here we go. You can find the link to the Kickstarter in the description of this video. You can find it on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. So, here we have it. That's 1,100 backers that we have with 3 days left to go until New Year's Eve at midnight to try to get 508 more backers. We believe that if we get there, if we fall around $350,000 earned, that's what we're looking at in terms of the capital that we'll need to do all of the major things that we do. So what I do, because I like to be transparent and explain to people without getting into a crazy amount of detail, we set aside an amount that we want to hit in order to pay our staff, in order to pay myself, and in order to pay the taxes and fees that come out of a Kickstarter, which are a lot more than most people think. So, for example, right now, if we earned exactly what you see on the screen, which is $280,000, immediately 28,000 of that is gone through Kickstarter and credit card processors. On top of that, the revenue from the Kickstarter is taxed. Although a portion of what you use from the Kickstarter, if they are going towards certain goals that help build your business, can be written off like business expenses. So when we want to build something cool like a donation-based clinic, this works a lot better, right? Because there's a portion of it that we can write off. So that's why we do it. We try to do like these big cool goals that we think will serve the larger community of the YouTube members, the students, and so forth. A portion of when the Kickstarter does really well, it also means that I don't really have to care as much about trying to hit certain numbers with regard to student tuition, which then means that student tuitions for people who are in need can be provided without a bottom line, right? So when the Kickstarter does well, it means that I can offer need-based tuition to people because I've covered enough of what I need to earn through the Kickstarter so that there's not that pressure for the programs to earn at the normal rate. So I can provide, 100 students with need-based tuition or something like that. So at any rate, that's sort of the rocket science behind all of it, in case that matters to anyone. But yeah, so we need 508 more backers. When you donate, you can pick up a lot of different things. And by the way, let's see. Yes, the Roots and Spheres class is there on sale as well. So here's someone was asking that question. Hetty was asking that question. You can find the link at the top of my website, nightlightastrology.com, in the description of this video, or in the live stream chat that I provided. It'll be in the chat box in the posted video afterward as well. When you scroll down, you can see like the basic donation of $25 gets you the Astrology of 2023 calendar, which we have made. It's a digital calendar, and it's something that will tell you what I'm going to be talking about as the year goes on. So I map out my talks a year in advance. I don't always exactly stick to talking about everything that I decide to talk about, right? But sometimes I go more in one direction than another. But you're going to get a calendar that shows you all of the major transits of the year that I'm going to be covering in my YouTube channel. And that'll give you a sense of kind of what to expect, almost like you have a TV viewing guide for my YouTube channel. It's pretty cool. At the $50 level, you'll see the Astrology of 2023 video. That is a longer talk on what I consider to be, I think it's the top 12 transits of 2023 and why I think they're a big deal. At $75, you can receive access to an exclusive presentation that I did at a conference in Colorado on why I think people are interested in Hellenistic astrology. Why has it become popular? There's another one, the year ahead horoscope reading. That is like we're doing horoscopes right now. This is for your sun or rising sign. You get a recording that is about half an hour in length, and it's some of them are a little bit longer, some a little bit shorter, but it's devoted to the top dozen transits or so for your sun or rising sign for the year ahead. So that's a good one that I don't release anywhere else. And then there's some other ones like the mystical nodes of the moon. I give a whole lecture on what the nodes of the moon meant to ancient astrologers. I talk a lot about, there's a video that I do on Saturn and why people have Saturn all wrong. At least a lot of people do. I have a 4-hour talk on the ancient meaning of the houses that I do. Then there's a podcast that I'm doing in the fall called The Oracle Speaks, which is a 12-part series that I'm not releasing anywhere else, and you can get access to that. That's all about why astrology should be thought of as a form of divination and not a science, and what it means to develop a relationship with an oracle, how that happens. Then there's some readings. I have like a mini reading, and I have ask 3 horary questions, greatly discounted horary question readings. So you could ask 3 readings, and you end up getting I don't know what it is. It ends up being like $100 less than the cost of a horary reading would be on my website. The Roots and Spheres class that's coming up on all of those moon circle gatherings and working with plant teachers, that's on sale. The masterclass series, which starts in February, is on sale. And then you can pick any of my 1-year programs on sale for 50% off. And that's also like $400 or $500 cheaper than our early bird rates. So you save a ton on that. And then you can bundle them together. The best one we have is there's 9 of them left, and those are the 4-class specials. So we made those for hitting 50,000 backers, and that's where you can take all of the 6 classes that I offer that are all 1 year in length. You can bundle any 4 of them together in any combination you'd like at any time you'd like. They never expire. You could even gift one or transfer one of the 4 to someone else or whatever. That 4-class pack will take the price of each class down to 75% off the normal rate. So that's a really good deal. There's only 9 of those left. Yeah, so that is the gist of what you can get in terms of rewards. And again, really a big thank you to the 1,102 people who have contributed. Really, really appreciate you guys. Hopefully we can get to our goal. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Alex has been through my programs. Alex has been through year 1, year 2, and horary now, right?
I've been through year one in horror. Yeah. I'm still in the middle of horror, which I'm really enjoying. And, I would also say too, years ago when I was first studying astrology, my YouTube algorithm brought me to this lovely guy who gave these talks on astrology in this tiny little blue room. And I was like, who is this? And he read the whole Srimad Bhagavatam. Like, who is this? Like, it's just incredible. Like, I was like, and ever since, I was really in a place where I wasn't sure if I wanted to study astrology or not. And I did Adam's first year class just really to like, enjoy more about astrology. And I really enjoyed Adam's talks and his channel. And that class gave me the love of astrology to go into wanting to do readings. And so I also think too, Adam, really learning the ancient system and learning it with the 7 classical planets and keeping it simple for that first year made all the difference in my learning. So if you're really thinking of learning and studying astrology, like one of the things, I don't know if you've reformatted it or such, but like we worked just with the 7 classical planets for that first year. And it changed the way I look at my practice. It changed the way I look at charts. It made it much easier and more accessible when I added the outer planets back in. It was just a really wonderful foundation of confidence to be able to work with that system and then add in things here and there that I've added back in over the years since that.
Yeah, I mean, most people don't realize that what you're getting when you study astrology online is like a mishmash of a lot of different schools and traditions, and you never really know which piece of theory fits where. Like, people will come into my classes with ideas like all over the map about houses, signs, planets, aspects. None of them individually are like wrong per se, but they don't really know where they come from, and they don't really understand why certain ideas might be completely incompatible with other ideas that they have, and how that's creating a lot of confusion when they go to try to read a chart. Going back to the roots of ancient astrology and studying the foundations theoretically, philosophically, spiritually, you get this. It's like learning to meditate on the earliest hermetic mandala of astrological information, right? Which is like a language that you're learning. You take it in very deeply. And then it's like, you now have an understanding of, Venus that's rooted in her relationship with like 4 other gods. And then the context that you find Venus in another god's sign will suddenly be way easier to understand than you've ever understood it before, because Hellenistic astrologers teach you, they have a way of teaching you by weaving multiple concepts together constantly in order to make sense of any one thing. It's really hard to describe to people how much better you get at astrology if you take some time to study Hellenistic, because you end up just sounding like you're trying to say that there's the best school ever, and it's the only school of astrology that exists. And actually it's like, no, you could study any school of astrology, but if you go back and take time to study the roots, whatever, if you're a evolutionary astrologer or you're a Uranian astrologer or whatever you are, understanding those roots is going to make you like 10 times better at whatever kind of astrology you're doing.
Yeah, and Adam, totally. And riffing off that, like I use asteroids in my practice and some of the Kuiper Belt objects sometimes, but I use them very sparingly and in very different, very selected ways based on having studied that map of a system in the Hellenistic system that also provides you with a lot of whys. And I need to know why. I don't want to be like, well, why is the 5th house this? Why is the 4th house this? Why was Saturn signs Aquarius and Capricorn? And one of the things that, it's now so ingrained to me, I don't think about it even very much, but just even understanding the luminaries and Saturn's relationships to the luminaries and all of these other, all the other planets' relationships, that helps you understand aspects, helps you understand the signs better. It helps me explain signs to people in a way they may not have heard, that allows them to explore different depths of them. So it's just, my point also with that is that like I've also added in other schools of astrology that I've studied from, but that's always my base, is the traditional zodiac, traditional rulers and whole sign houses. And I know why I'm using that, and it makes all the difference.
For example, most modern astrologers, and this was me too, like before I studied ancient astrology, you are taught that there is something about the first house that has to do with Aries, right? And its meaning has something to do with Aries and maybe Mars or something like that. In ancient astrology, the reason that you get all of the topics of the first house, the native, their body, their appearance, their health, it's their psychology, etc., comes from a very nuanced astronomical rationale. It has nothing to do with the 12 signs. So you find a lot of modern students coming into the classes and going, oh, well, the sixth house has something to do with, say, selfless service and sacrifice because it's related to Virgo. Ancient astrologers did not have that understanding at all. Their understanding of the sixth house was rooted in astronomy and what planets are doing right after they set and disappear in the western sky. And that's where the topics come from. When you are able to pull apart signs and houses, even that for most people completely revolutionizes their practice. When they understand the difference between what a sign is philosophically, conceptually, what it does to a planet, how a planet changes depending on what sign it's in, what the proper way of thinking about the difference between signs and planets are, what to speak of signs, planets, and how they differ from houses, or what they have in common with the house and what they don't. Those things alone, most people never learn, because the honest truth is that modern astrology, until very recently, was deprived of the vast majority of the traditional source texts from the earliest period of horoscopic astrology. Those texts literally became available to us in English only very, very recently. And so Hellenistic astrology is not even really a school of astrology as much as it is about trying to take us back to the roots of where all of the concepts come from and kind of pull them apart in more meaningful and coherent ways, and then teach you how ancient astrologers said you ought to read a chart. I call my class Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, because the first year program, because once we've done that, of course, we also want to be able to bring into our practice all of the incredible developments in modern astrology. For example, the combination of depth psychology through people like Freud and Jung, and the way that Jung was using astrology. We want to bring all of that sort of counseling psychology sensibility along with us. So it's really, at the end of the day, about fusing ancient astrology with modern psychological and archetypal astrology. But in order to do that, in my first year program, we pull out the outer planets. We pull out like everything modern, just to go back to the roots, so you can really understand things in a vacuum. And then year two, we start to put those things back in and reintegrating them. People, the whole way that they understand astrology completely changes. Alex is a great testimony to that.
Yeah, it's awesome. And also, the other thing to just say quickly, Adam, is the live readings that you do in year one. I don't know if you do them year two too, but that was like mind blowing to watch how you also interact with the client, and then you take all that theory from the year and put it into practice when you're really when you're speaking with a live human being and their life, their actual life, and what's going on with them. And it really shows you how to concretize the theory into a session that will be helpful and of value and service to somebody.
Also, when you learn that ancient astrologers were mostly thinking about astrology as a form of divination, it really changes the way that you read charts. That's something that's like my soapbox in my program. People who take my programs know, like, I tend to hammer on that a lot, because that's a big part of the way that I practice. But anyway, Lorella says, I'm a current student. I decided to do Adam's class because I love the way he incorporates depth psychology and Jungian ideas. Well, that's great feedback, because one of the fair criticisms of ancient astrology is that sometimes it just feels like like a traditional can feel like boring. It can feel sort of historical and academic. And I like to think that my programs are very soulful and still very psychologically and spiritually deep and enriching. So that's great feedback to hear. Okay, well, enough about that. Thank you guys for letting me promote my programs, the Kickstarter. I know that you are here to hear astrology and not the advertisements, but this is also how we build this into cooler and cooler things, like the donation-based reading service that we want to provide. So I really appreciate you guys sort of letting me do my thing. we'll try to give you some good horoscopes now. I'm going to put the link one more time to the Kickstarter in the chat box so you can find it. You can also find it in the description of this video, or go to my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. And when you go to the website, you're going to click on the courses page to learn about any of the courses that you can get in the Kickstarter. And if you see at the top of the page, there's a Kickstarter link as well at the homepage. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to start with Aries and go through all 12 signs and give you some transits for each. And I've picked some for every sign, and Alex is going to help me wrap on these things. So for Cancer, although there are lots of transits, we're just picking like one or two big ones for every sign. So for Aries rising, Aries sun or rising, we're going to look specifically at the full moon in Cancer on January 6th, as well as the new moon in Aquarius that comes through on January 21st. Remember, on the 22nd, Venus conjoins Saturn in Aquarius as well. So that focuses the full moon on January 6th in your fourth house if you're in Aries or Aries rising. And the new moon comes through January 21st with Venus conjoining Saturn on the 22nd in Aquarius in your 11th. So when I look at these big lunar developments in the month for you to start the year, I think this is about home and social group family identity, right? You've got Jupiter just entering your house, placing a lot of emphasis on you, strengthening within yourself. But then there's a full moon around the fourth house, a lot of emphasis on home, family, roots, living environment, family karma. And then a new moon in the 11th house of groups, friends, and allies. So while this looks like a very empowering month for Aries with Jupiter entering your first house, I think it's a lot about home, family, and social dynamics as the month goes on. I think that's where the importance is going to be placed by the lunar cycles in January. So those are the areas that I would look for if you're in Aries. Do you want to say anything about these new and or the full moon and the new moon?
Yeah, I would just, what you've said, and I think, the full moon, particularly in Cancer, I mean, that is a sign very much associated with the proverbial or the symbolic home in the house, the fourth house that represents home, the ancestry. There might be some emotional connection to that, or something that's being shined on, a completion around an emotional cycle around the family or around ancestry. Sometimes even the fourth house, even more specifically related to your dad or your primary paternal caregiver. And somehow that informing the way you intellectualize or bring a more sort of connective quality to your professional or social networks. I often think of the 11th house both as social and professional networks. I've seen kind of it affect both. And something with Venus hitting Saturn later in the month in your 11th house is sort of like picking a direction, or something feeling like it's being sort of whittled down in order to go a certain direction with those social groups. So that's my 2 cents on that. Yeah.
That's again, it's like, it's exciting that Jupiter's coming into your first house. Mm-hmm. But the empowerment there seems to be running through social considerations, the personal, familial ones, and the larger social or professional ones. Mm-hmm. All right, let's look at Taurus. So we're putting Taurus on the ascendant now. And for Taurus sun or rising, I want to look specifically at the Venus-Uranus square, which is taking place on, there it is. It is taking place on January 14th. I'll just move this to, all right, here we go. So followed by the new moon in Aquarius, which is coming through on the 21st. So between the 14th and the 21st, two major transits for Tauruses, right? You've got your ruling planet Venus in your 10th house, squaring Uranus, and then by the 21st and 22nd, conjoining Saturn around that new moon in Aquarius. You want to lead us off on this one, Alex?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I think that, for Taurus risings, your sense of self in relationship to your career or how you're seen in the world is somehow being liberated. There's something particularly from your sense of self with Uranus there something that has to be freed, something that has to be done its own way, something that has felt constricted, maybe frustrated for a while, hitting Venus, which is in your career house, which maybe leads to an unorthodox, out of the box type of change that ultimately feels liberating. The only thing I would caveat I always make with Uranus transits, especially when they have to do with career, self, or relationships, is they can give the feeling of needing an immediate freedom. And sometimes you just want to take the breath and then check that, because it can be also just the feeling like I need to be free. And then you wake up the next morning, you're like, oh, what did I do? So did I just give my resignation? Did I just throw coffee in my boss's face? Don't do that, but like that sort of thing. Yeah, that's where I go with that one to start.
I think of Uranus in the first, with ruling planet of the first house, Venus, being in the 10th. And it's easy to think that there's this house of personal identity, and then there's this house of public identity. But when are the two linked together? One way that they would be linked together would be if the ruling planet is in the 10th, squaring a planet in the first. It's as though there is an inner conflict or dialogue related to who am I and how does it appear in the world? Does who I am on the inside, or more physically or personally, need to shift the way it shows up outside? Or is that BS? And do I need to stop caring about what other people see or think? And this is just for me? Or so I feel like those kinds of tensions between something more public or professional and something that's truly more personal, or maybe even more about your health or your physical appearance or your internal life, are having a conversation and trying to create some kind of meaningful change. But how socially determined or conditioned is that change? It could be the kind of thing where you're like, I don't care what you think, and so I'm gonna dye my hair pink, and then as soon as you do it, you go, oh well, I didn't need to dye my hair pink to make my point. Do you know what I mean? So or on the other hand, maybe you absolutely did need to dye your hair pink. So whatever. But I think it's that kind of thing where it's about it's the personal versus the public, and there's some kind of change going on there. I think it's interesting that the new moon suggests the same thing. Well, how you show up out in the world is going through some really noticeable changes. They are either reflective of inner change, or are you projecting something that's not you? And I wonder if Venus is going to get some kind of gut check more, with the new moon on January 21st and into the 22nd, when Venus can join Saturn. That's like, okay, well, are you real? Is this what are the consequences of the kind of person you're becoming, or what will people think, or how will it affect your standing with someone or somewhere, like at work? Those are the things that come to my mind there. Should we go on?
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right, Gemini. So for me, the transit of the month for Gemini, at least the one that really stands out, is Mars turning direct. So Mars is going, right? I mean, that's in your first house.
Yes.
It's like, okay,
yes,
Mars is turning direct January 12th and all the way, let's say, up to the 14th. So let's just say the 12th to the 14th. I think that's a really big one. I think the new moon in Aquarius in your 9th house is also probably one of the biggest ones of the month. You could go into Venus square Uranus as well, but let's just sort of say the whole sequence of what Venus is doing as it is focused in your 9th house, and as a new moon comes through a week after Mars turns direct in your 9th house. So we're going to focus on the 9th and the 1st for Geminis. Let me just highlight them. So we're going to focus on these two houses as the places that are intimately connected this month, with Mars turning direct from the 12th to the 14th, and then that sequence that Venus goes through with Saturn and the new moon around the 21st, 22nd. Why don't you start us off with this one as well?
Well, I'm excited for Gemini risings because I think that, Mars retrograde in the first house that can be frustrating. That can feel frustrating. That can feel like it's not possible to get traction on things. It can feel like in your body, your mind, there's there's a sort of inner need to want to move forward and not feeling like you can move forward. So I think just the Mars turning direct provides some relief with that. And like Adam and I were saying in the when we're doing the overview, it may feel till the 17th, 18th when Mercury turns direct in Capricorn, where that really starts to take effect for you. It feels like the motor really gets going. And then that leads us into the ninth house, where there's some relationship between the idea of what has been happening in the body or the mind or your health or your psychology about that feeling of frustration or maybe being held back, or something you were reviewing in terms of how you view power and assertion, really factoring into your belief system, your spirituality, factoring into a sense of how you kind of make sense of the world, or even, that you become or go to people who give you wise counsel on how to sort of work with this Mars turning direct. I always find that with the ninth house too, being a place where we seek out counsel from those who can give us good advice. And it's an air trine too between these two signs. So it's very, very full of ideas, very intellectual. There's a lot of the mind involved in this as well, the mental mind involved in this.
Yeah, I like the idea that this Mars, that there's a personal change happening for Geminis. It's about changing something, maybe even very physical, or something about the way that you communicate or the way that you express yourself. However, it appears to be rooted, as Mercury is, and as the ninth house is similarly connected to mental and intellectual things. This change is connected to ideas. So changing your mind, changing your beliefs, studying something, that the way in which you're, all of us make decisions based on an evolution of how we see the world, what we believe to be true, what we believe to be important or ethical, spiritual or philosophical ideas, or even our lack of certainty. Well, I just don't know, informs a lot of the way we make decisions about really important things. So however you're changing as a Gemini personally seems to be connected to a reorientation of your beliefs or ideas or your intellect or something like that. And that's why I think you could also say that seeking out counsel, like Alex was saying, would make a ton of sense for something like this. Or that, like, maybe you're starting to integrate or reach some meaningful conclusions based on something you've been studying, or someone that you've been learning from, even just a book you've been reading that starts to have an impact on you, and suddenly your self-concept is changing somehow. Those are the kinds of, a philosophy that changes your life, a class that changes your life, something like that.
You're going to find many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. I just had to bring Obi-Wan Kenobi into it. Sorry, it had to happen. We haven't mentioned Star Wars once. I'm trying to pick up some slack here.
Yeah. Not an episode without Star Wars appearing is like it's not complete. It's like an episode without the big circle,
Exactly.
All right, we've got what Cancer rising. So for Cancers, we've got to go with the full moon on January 6th in your home sign. Here's the thing. For me, I think that the Mars turning direct in your 12th house just after a full moon in your first is really, it's very significant. I want to say, before I dive into my thoughts on that you have activity happening in a couple different places in your chart this month. At the very beginning of the month, like a Venus-Pluto conjunction in your 7th house of love and relationships. Like, wow, that's a big one. So you could see some action around love and relationships at the very beginning of the month. Jupiter's just entered your 10th house of career in December. So you might be still feeling the intensity of Jupiter, like, sort of igniting change and kind of putting down the stake of a cardinal sign, and being like, all right, let's go, let's start something. So, 10th and 7th are kind of rocking for Cancers right now. But I'm looking at that full moon and then Mars, the first half of the month, Mars turning direct. And I'm thinking you are reaching a place of emotional clarity after maybe dealing with a lot of back and forth, a lot of confusion, a lot of turmoil, a lot of inner debate, with Mars retrograde in Gemini in the 12th. And I think the full moon in Cancer in the first for Cancers is going to bring clarity. It's going to bring a sense of I am content, I'm happy, I'm empowered, I feel clear. That's what a full moon in your own sign in the first house should do. It should give you a feeling of empowerment. And then Mars turns direct in the 12th. And I think that could start to clear the cobwebs if you've been dealing with a lot of mental and emotional turmoil since late October, maybe specifically involving family members or children or marriage or things that are more personal. Maybe they're relationships like friendships or something, but I think of more intensely personal, emotional, internal dynamics that have been a source of turmoil or stress that are starting to come clear. And that would be, again, specifically from January, what did I say, the 6th, when we've got the full moon in Cancer, all the way to Mars direct between the 12th and the 12th. No, is it the 11th and the 12th? It's right about there. Yeah, so it's like the 11th and 12th.
Yeah, 11th and 12th. Really, I love this full moon in your first house, Cancer rising. I really like this because I think it illuminates too with what can feel like, Venus is going to go through, and again, you can see this more if you go back and watch the general ideas we did for the month. Venus goes through the conjunction of Pluto, then a square to Uranus, and a conjunction of Saturn, finally winds up at the end of the month in Pisces. And there can be, because this is, starting in your 7th house, there can be some relational understandings, things that come up from the surface. And Mars retrograde in your 12th house, the same sort of idea, like things that are revealed or things that come to the surface or that are suddenly brought into the light of day. The full moon, I think, in your first house will ask you a little bit like shining a light on what feels most natural to you as a Cancer rising, and this would depend on where your moon is in the chart. So I'm not going to go crazy on this, but that you feel nurtured, you feel cared for, you in your body feel safe. You feel like you can go back into a place that feels comfortable, even when there might appear to be a lot of dipping and diving and changing and subsurface stuff coming to the surface around you for the beginning of the month.
Yeah, that's nicely said. Again, it's sort of hard to pick for Cancers because you do have that really potent Venus-Pluto conjunction at the beginning of the month in the 7th house. I wonder what that's about. Well, that could be fun though. I mean, because it's a quick transit, and I don't know. I would say sometimes you see those things manifest as nothing more than we're gonna watch. Oh God. What was the transit that I was just? The moon was in Aquarius just recently, just a couple of days ago. And it was, no. The moon was in Capricorn conjoining Pluto. And we watched Moon Age Daydream, the David Bowie documentary. Have you seen?
Oh yeah. No, I haven't seen that.
It was awesome. I really liked it. But what I found so interesting was that I'm like, this is astrology. What's going on right now? And I looked, and the moon was conjoining Pluto in Capricorn, and David Bowie was born with a couple planets in Capricorn in the 12th house, right? So effectively, so sometimes, I mean, to be stupid, but sometimes Venus will conjoin Capricorn, Pluto, and you'll just watch a movie that'll somehow reflect the themes of Venus and Pluto in Capricorn. It'll be a murder mystery where the two lovers kill each other or something. You know what I mean? But watch for that at the beginning of the month, because for Cancers, the Venus-Pluto dynamic is maybe the dark horse for transit of the month, if not, I think, the ones that we're talking about. Okay, so let's move on. Are you a Leo rising or Virgo rising, Alex?
I'm a Leo rising.
I kneed it. I was like, I've
got the lion right here on my desk.
Nice. Yeah, dude, for sure. You just have that warmth and that big Leo energy. So let's see. Here's what I was thinking, but I was going to kind of defer to you since if I remembered correctly, you're the Venus, or you're the Leo rising. So I was thinking, let's look at Venus square to Uranus from the 7th to the 10th, as well as the new moon in the 7th. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah.
Now,
Yep.
if you don't mind, I'm going to let you talk about this for a couple of minutes because I have drank my iced tea too quickly. I need to use the bathroom again.
Go
You
for
go
it.
for it. You start us off. I'll be right
Okay.
back.
All right. So for all of us Leo risings, I think what's really interesting is we've got Venus, the planet of relationships, if we put that on it, in the house of relationships, squaring Uranus in the house of the public persona. I could say one thing that's been coming up for me a lot lately is how, the way I've been conceiving of myself in my career has been changing drastically. Like, I used to be more of a yoga teacher, now I'm becoming much more of a professional astrologer, and how that is affecting the way that I'm actually entering into relationships. So the way that the sort of radical way that I'm conceiving of myself, because I never considered myself ever that I would be a professional astrologer in my career, is affecting the way I conceive of myself as someone who is entering into relationship. And, with Uranus and Aquarius, you're talking about two very out of the box, eclectic, avant-garde, kind of the, what is often considered to be like outside of the norm type of ideas, both Aquarius and Uranus. And so both interacting with each other in a square aspect might be something about how you're going on a sort of wholly new way of conceiving of your career that is affecting a wholly new and sort of out of the box way that you are, you're going into in relationship. I took over the Elenbaas YouTube for the day. What of it? I'm drinking my tea too. I'll need my moment. Don't worry. Yeah. Oh, Leo rising. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Adam, for saying it. I bring the warmth. I also bring the drama on a bad day. So I fully own that part of my personality too.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just talking about how, the way I was talking about how I've been moving from being more of a yoga teacher to a professional astrologer and medium into it now. And how that's been Uranus in my 10th house, and squaring Venus, I think, has gone a long way. Just squaring my 7th house in general, how I come into relationship, how I go on dates, how I present myself to other people, has gone through a radical shift.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of going with those ideas.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I like that a lot because I think one of the things, remember this month, your ruling planet as a Leo is the sun, who will also be moving into Aquarius later in January. To me, when you see Venus going through this house, hitting Uranus in the 10th, okay, let's just say one of the things that is important to a Leo on an archetypal level, you think about the sun and its rulership over the sign of Leo coming in the middle of summer as the light is dying, but it's also the middle of summer. This is, in a sense, like you could say it's like being an adult in some ways. You're in your prime, but you're also now closer to death than you are, birth. So a concern for Leos is how to live a good life, and the good life is defined by having a strong sense of meaning, purpose, dignity, pride. Some people might say ego, and maybe even a concern with legacy. Well, what happens after I die, which could be spiritual, or it could be about leaving behind a sense that you did something that was important or powerful or that felt good. And these are usually a big concern for Leo, but along with it comes the need to be seen and liked by others. It's Saturn in Aquarius is much less inclined to care what other people think and is more likely to stand outside the city wall in some way. And they may still like to be seen or noticed, but it is more likely to be as an outsider or as someone who is different in some way. So when you think of Venus in the 7th right now for Leos squaring Uranus and then this new moon in the 7th, even though it could very well be like just traditional, like, oh, it's something to do with love and relationships and something to do with work. Another way of looking at it would be to say that, like, as you were saying, Alex, with your shift in professional identity, it's a big risk for a Leo to be like, guess what, guys? I'm a psychic fortune teller. I'm not a yoga teacher. Yoga teachers are
Oh my
like
God, you have no idea.
it's very respectable, right? I mean, I know this because when we owned a yoga studio for 10 years and people would say, what do you do for a living? My wife and I, even though she's also an herbalist and I'm an astrologer, we would say we own a yoga studio because everyone is like, oh, wow. Oh, that's really cool. But if you say, well, I'm an astrologer, they'd be like, oh, like, it's immediate, like, awkward silence. I don't believe in that kind of thing, but I'm not going to tell you, you're crazy.
They look at you like you're somewhere between like serial killer and tax auditor. It's like, you do what?
Exactly.
But the thing is too, you also do find more and more, though, I will say, people are like, oh, that's cool. Tell me more about that. I think with younger people, they do, but like you come out of it, especially in Boston, like that's how people know me. I've been fairly public as a yoga teacher for a long time. And so it's been really interesting to go through that shift.
Yeah.
And I still do teach yoga too, so it is still something I'll always do that, but it's just that identity shift and how I'm relating,
Yeah. Well, and so if you think about Venus and Saturn and the new moon in that 7th, but all square to Uranus in the 10th, it's almost as though there's, because we tend to project whatever's in the 7th house, we tend to easily project or identify in partners or other people,
Mm-hmm.
and even though it's a part of us too. So if
Right.
there's an Aquarian part of you as a Leo, right, and a Uranian part of you, so it's almost as though it's about stepping outside of your comfort zone socially, with the way you present or the way you show up. Maybe that's your public reputation, but I think that's one way of reading that. It falls in line perfectly with what you were saying, which is not so much, okay, look to the place of relationships and career, and maybe, you get a new job and you get a new partner, or there'll be activity in both that are somehow related. That's like, 1A, right? But 1B, I think, or maybe even right next to 1A, like slash, would be that you're going through some you're taking some risks in terms of how you show up socially and publicly.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Saturn and Aquarius and Uranus and Uranus, one of the things they share very strongly, Adam, is a healthy middle finger when necessary.
Yeah.
Like a healthy, like, I don't really give a shit what you think. And you're right, for Leos, and especially ruled by, Jupiter, my sun ruled by Jupiter, it can be very concerning. Like, oh God, now it's just like, no, this is what I do. I love it. I'm in love with it, that sort of idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's good for Leos to always, you don't want a Leo to like suddenly become an Aquarius, like, but you do need transits where you become aware of the fact that you're, if it's your sun or your rising, the opposite sign is always a potential unconscious shadow, and so getting to know that part of your, like, it's like you can't really be a Leo until you get to know your Aquarius, sort of thing.
It's like you can't be the king unless you can go be the hermit for a couple days on the edge of town. And conversely, for Aquarius, you can't, you want to sometimes be the hermit at the edge of town that comes into town and plays pinochle every weekend or something. It's like, it's just like,
dude, if that's the picture of your retirement that I'm going to keep in my head forever now. When Alex retires, he's going to play pinochle.
Oh, it's totally good. I can just see it. I'm going to be like, hey, I'm here.
Is the pinochle game happening or what?
Pinochle game happening. I'm only coming on my hut for one day, and then I'm going back.
I don't even know what pinochle is. I know it's a card game, right?
It's a card game I used to play years ago with my grandmother. I used to kind of watch her play.
There's
with her
definitely
friends.
a grandma involved when pinocles.
Like, yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, the grandmas like come flocking out of their houses if someone mentions the word pinochle.
Oh,
I'm just kidding. Fun. My grandma played pinochle. I know for a fact that she did, because as soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, my grandmother played pinochle. All right, anyway. I love this. That's a good one. All right. Let's go. So we're on Virgo rising now. I know. That one cracked me up. So, okay. How about Mars turning direct in your career house for one? I think that's definitely a big one. And what other one did I have for you? Let's see. No, there wasn't. Sorry, guys. Give me just a second. Yeah. So, okay. So here's what I did. I did the same two that we did earlier with cancers. The full moon, excuse me, is the first one is the full moon in your 11th, followed by Mars turning direct in your 10th. So this is between January 6th and say January 12th. It's about a period of a week this month that I think is probably pretty important for Virgo risings. Um, so, for example, this is an interesting, like I can give you an example actually from my daughter's birth chart that I think is really interesting because, well, anyway, I'll just tell you the story. Um, so my daughter is having trouble articulating certain sounds, like certain letters. She's great in school. She's, really social, communicative, not embarrassed to speak at all, but she's having trouble articulating a few letters. And we're like, just let it develop naturally, whatever. But we got some feedback where it was like, she might need a little extra help. We're like, okay, cool. So she will start work with like, it's not like a speech. I don't know what they're called. It's like a speech teacher. Maybe they're called, I don't, maybe they are called speech therapists. But so it's someone who's going to be sitting down with her and helping her learn like her R's and her W's and some things like that. So what I found really interesting was that one of the reasons that this came up is that she wanted to, her friends are starting to be able to enunciate those things and she can't, right? So there's some social feeling of like, I want to be able to, she's expressed feeling socially a little bit embarrassed about that. And so, and we talked to her teacher and blah, blah, blah. So this is what we're doing. Well, she's going to be starting it on the 6th. And so she'll have her first week of like playing these games and learning to enunciate certain letters with this person between the 6th and the 12th. I thought that was really fascinating for like how someone asked earlier, how could you see this showing up in a little person's chart, like your kid? So here's an example for that person that asked the question. So my daughter's chart, Mars in Gemini in the 10th house, because she's a Virgo rising, will turn direct just after that full moon in Cancer. And she's probably going to go through something of a social transformation as she starts getting some help in enunciating and speaking with something that has been frustrating for her. So during this period of Mars retrograde in her 10th, she expressed frustration over speech and the social ramifications. We're getting her a little teacher to help her. I don't think it's a little teacher. I don't know why I said that. It's a okay, well, it's a teacher, whatever. So the teacher's going to be giving her some help. Anyway, I think that's a really great example from a young person's chart that illustrates the astrology. But the idea here would be that there is something that has like social or professional, that there's the importance of your social life or the groups of friends that you have or colleagues that you have or something about the larger social hemisphere that you inhabit, that there's an emphasis on that, while at the same time something about either your public image or reputation or your job or your work is going through change. So you think about how you show up in the world, what you look like, how you communicate, how you think, what your job is, and its connection to what other people think about you, where you fit in, who your friends are, etc. So like those are the two houses that I would really look at for Virgo risings. Did that make sense, Alex?
It makes total sense. And, I love for her too, because that can be really hard for a kid, right? To feel like you're standing out or you're not getting somewhere your friends are getting. And like that full moon in the 11th house in Cancer just feels like such a nurturing, like I'm starting to feel safer again and emotionally safe in my friend group, cared for, like stable. I just really, for that particular story, I just love that full moon. In the 11th house. And also I think it's interesting too that for Virgo risings, Mars will turn direct, you'll have the full moon, and then you got Mercury, your ruling planet, turning direct on the 17th or 18th. that feels really important for Virgo risings too, in that sequence, that your ruling planet that's when it really feels like the sequence starts to move forward for you around the 17th or 18th, when Mercury turns direct.
Yeah, I'm glad that some people at least laughed when I called her speech. Someone said speech pathologist is the correct phrase, so I'm gonna go with that. Someone said,
little teacher.
Yeah. I'm glad you guys got a kick out of that. That was a total mistake on my part, but I started imagining
Elenbaas and I are hopped up on black tea. Anything can happen. Anything. You never know. We're wild. We're crazy.
Yeah. You know who I thought of right away? This is who I thought of. I'm going to show you. Hold on. Because just to show you where my little demented imagination goes, when I said little teacher, I will show you. I immediately thought of this guy from freaking Twin Peaks. Did you ever see Twin Peaks?
Oh my God, with Kyle MacLachlan, Laura Palmer.
Yes, exactly. So I could not help but think, like, immediately when I said it, the reason I cracked up. See, this is what people don't realize. People always ask me, like, how you seem to crack yourself up a lot. It's not that I think that I'm so funny. It's that usually what happens when I say something is images pop into my mind that are like really fast. I have Mars and Gemini, so I think that's part of it. They just pop into my head really rapidly, and it's like my subconscious has like a little stand-up comedian that as soon as I say something stupid will put a crazy image in my head that then makes me crack up. And so this is what my mind conjured up. As soon as I said little teacher, I started thinking about the like creepy dude from Twin Peaks who was like tap dancing in hell. Do you remember that guy? So that was what popped into my head. That's why I started laughing so hard. So yeah.
Of any image, I would imagine it was not that one, but that's amazing. I love that. That's
exactly. There would be like and he was like kind of like a wise goblin, I guess. Like what his role was in Twin Peaks. No one fucking knows what Twin Peaks was about anyway. So
no. The second season of that show, I remember like in the second season, halfway through, being like, "What?" It just felt like it was constant. Like it was like Neptune took over the whole show, and just like, I don't know, man. This is just we have gone off the rails, guys. I'm really sorry. We've been doing astrology for the last 10 hours with black tea.
Oh my God. Well, you know what's really helpful though is like I spend a lot of time in my classes talking about how important it is to have a really super imagistic connection to astrology, because when you're reading for people, as someone just said here, who is it that just said this? Rena said, I get it, because when explaining astrology and what people look like, well, the connection to that would just be that so many times when I'm trying to think of how to describe a transit to someone in a reading, let's say, it's the images that pop into my head.
Right.
Which is why it's really important, if you're into astrology, to pay attention to small transits and how they show up in something stupid like the movie you're watching, because that's where you get that data bank. Like you build the data bank that way.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah. Season 2 of Twin Peaks was like, all right, I loved season 1. Season 2, I felt like this is like an acid trip gone terribly bad. Like this is not, I can't follow this.
It was just like, it felt like Neptune took over. It's just like, we're swimming through what? Huh? What? Like the whole time. But I think that's true too, Adam, about like images. I just want to say like that I always ask before a reading, I ask the archetypes to speak clearly through me. Speak your language, and they always show up as an image or a representation or an idea. And that's also goes to what you teach so well, which is astrology is divination. You're divining meaning from abstract to specific, taking from the abstract to the specific. Yeah.
Well, it's like, and I've used this example before. I think maybe even we've talked about it before, where I had a former student of mine who kept movie stubs. Did I tell you about that?
Oh yeah. And would use those as the draw them like a tarot.
Yeah. And because they were filled with so many images. And she would, the movie would conjure up an image that she knew would be intuitively appropriate for what the person was asking about. I mean, that's how divination works. It's like this weird neural superhighway networked superhighway of associated images, and the symbols are really just lightning rods that are connecting the different types of images together, like one mandala to another, and then you're sort of drawing on that to describe things. Or anyway, okay, so now we're getting so Twin Peaks that we've lost track of Libra, who is next. All right, so Libra, full moon in Cancer in your 10th house. That's going to be a big one for you on the 6th. That's an angular house. So on the 6th of January, here, let me just back it up a little bit so we can see this. So for Libra, Libra rising, here we go. All right, there we are. Should be able to see it now. It's a little crooked. Let's try it again. So there's the full moon. That's on the 6th, and I think that's a pretty significant one. I think the other thing that stands out to me, let me get my drawer here, is going to be the new moon in Aquarius. So the moon cycle, again, to me this month is a big deal. One of the reasons for that is that Venus is your ruling planet. So whether it's Venus making the square to Uranus or Venus's conjunction with Saturn or the new moon, I think it's all very 5th house based for Librans this month. And then I would give secondary importance to that full moon in Cancer on the 6th. I'm going to let you talk first, since I'm just babbling at this point. So you go ahead.
Still trying to figure out who got Laura Palmer.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I would say, for Libra risings, you have this new moon in your 5th house, related to, I would say is to look, is your career providing you with the ability to showcase creativity? Is it allowing you to generate and sort of bring inception to things that are beautiful and Venus-like? Venus is inner joy in the 5th house. It relates a lot to Venus. Is there something that comes up around family and children, particularly, that relates to career? And something around career too, with the full moon in Cancer in the career house, around, again, your feelings of feeling stable, nurtured, that you can be in your element. Is some of that with a new moon in Aquarius, which can be a little bit more detached and sort of up in the intellectual mind. Is there some need to sort of, that more intellectual or detached sense is coming around creativity, of merging that with a more emotional, more in the psyche or the mind idea that is happening around career? I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's kind of putting those two houses together.
Yeah. I think the full moon happens first, and it seems to, one of the things that I've noticed about Libra risings is that big transits to Cancer in the 10th, it can, sometimes for Librans, the family dynamic can be defining your sense of social identity or responsibility. See, Librans are like very socially aware, and that's like their strength. Also, sometimes their downside, like who your family told you to be as a kid when you're a Libra, the place or the role that they gave you in the family, consciously or unconsciously, will end up often being the role that you take on out in the world. So when you have any kind of Cancerian transit to the 10th for Librans, will often translate into, for example, conflicts between who am I and who did I become as a result of where I came from, So I wonder if there isn't some conflict between the socially conditioned me that maybe has some connections to my family of origin or my past or my history, maybe even my marriage or my role as a parent, or something that's more defined by culture, community, and family, versus your ruling planet Venus squaring Uranus in the 8th house, conjoining Saturn in the 5th house, which feels like it has more to do with, but what gives me joy, even if it marginalizes me or makes me like the black sheep, you know what I mean? So I think, and that's tough for Librans. Like I think there's a lot of signs that maybe like I think Cancers can be shy sometimes, whatever. But when it comes to like I don't necessarily want to put myself out there and tip the scales, right? I think Librans can really struggle with that. But I wonder if this isn't a month where you are facing, you're kind of confronting who people think you ought to be, maybe based on the culture you grew up in or expectations around family, and it's the things that are inherited, like Cancer, full moon in the 10th, that then amplifies this feeling of, screw it, I need to do something different, with Venus in the 5th, squaring Uranus, hitting Saturn, and so forth. That makes sense?
I've been thinking a lot. Yeah, it makes total sense. And I've been thinking a lot lately since our last video we did, Adam, about that way of relating, Libra rising to Cancer, the houses and how they relate to each other. And I think that's I'm really taking that in as we do this, because I'm looking at that in a whole new way, of how Cancer will tend to take over that area of life where, like, it just never occurred to me. It seems like it was right in front of my face. It never occurred to me how those things kind of interrelate.
Yeah, exactly. It's sometimes, especially with the angles, every set of angles is really like a complete puzzle, right? So, let's go into Scorpio rising, and we can maybe work this with Scorpio a little bit. So Scorpio sun or risings, right? If you want to understand Scorpio, you also have to understand the tension between Scorpio and Leo occupying the 10th, Scorpio the 1st. The pressure of the Leo midheaven is to be select, to stand out, to be a ball of light that drowns out all other lights. That's occupying the midheaven and exerting a pressure or force over by superior square the first house, which is much more cagey, private, intense, internal, deep, guarded, more defensive, and potent, but not as like seeking of, let's say, the spotlight. I mean, sort of stereotypical, but so that tension between the Scorpionic first house and the Leo 10th is almost always present in the life of a Scorpio, Scorpio sun or rise, or Scorpio rising sign, let's say. But you don't always see it because it's so natural. It's just such there's, like, for example, a lot of people will say, well, Scorpios often hold their cards close to the chest, but they also will resent or distrust people who are showy, big, and sort of just exude confidence. They'll sometimes want to undercut them, or they'll inherently distrust those people or be annoyed by their ego. Well, that's in part because that's the very pressure exerting a dominant force over the psyche of the first house from the 10th, right? So it's like that annoyance is built into the psychology of a Scorpio, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm actually thinking of a friend of mine who has Scorpio rising, and that describes him perfectly. Yeah. It's crazy.
From the Hip says, that's been my problem as a Scorpio rising. The spotlight often finds me, but I'm so private to the point where I don't speak up when I need to. You see, exactly. So a lot of the times it's just like we were just saying with Cancer in the first and Libra on the ascendant, if you understand the tension between that angular, the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th houses and the signs there, a lot of the chart can be sort of unlocked by understanding those dynamics between the different houses. And you can do that from the first to the fourth, from the fourth to the seventh. But it all tends to filter back to the primary importance of the ascendant. That always is everything. The rest of the angles will filter through that one angle being dominant within the personality.
Yep, makes sense.
So Scorpio rising, for me, this one is the Venus square Uranus dynamic because it's angular. So we have Venus in January squaring Uranus, and that is on, what do we say, the 14th? Is that? Yeah, that's Venus square Uranus on January 14th, followed by a new moon on the 21st in the 4th house, and a Venus-Saturn conjunction on the 22nd in Aquarius. I would look at this again now, the pressure between the 4th and the 7th house. I think you're looking in some ways, some similar themes that we were just talking about with Libra. 4th house is home, family, but Venus square Uranus around the 4th and the 7th is, how do I stand out, or how am I different from those people that I'm close with, whether in love or whether around the more private area of my life, like home, family, close relationships, maybe people you live with. But to me, this dynamic is about needing to individuate relative to family, or close relationships. And the need to individuate is really reflected by Venus's square to Uranus. Now, sometimes that will actually appear within the karma of a family unit through someone else. So, for example, your need to individuate may be prompted by the fact that a family member is doing something that is wildly outside of their character or really unexpected. You're disturbed by it. Maybe you are happy for them or whatever, and you may think, well, what does this have to do with me? But it's often the precursor for your own individuation process that a spouse, a lover, a family member will go through something surprising or unexpected. That because we're all connected around family and in the fourth and seventh house in our relationships, the changes you see in those spheres will have a ripple effect and will be filtering through to you. Why do we know this? Because you also have just had a major eclipse in your first house that had the sun conjoined with Venus, right? So what Venus is going through relates back to that October 25th eclipse, solar eclipse in the house of identity. So this is about you, even if the erratic changes maybe even come through a family member or a lover. It still relates back to you and something that's very existential for you. The other thing I would say about this, just that this is the kind of thing where you might see a breakup or moving out where you've been living with someone, like just that sort of sudden need to be free or break free from family or relationship patterns that aren't healthy is like a textbook thing with this transit. But yeah, those are the main things I have to say. What about you, Alex?
I love that. I love all of that. I was just thinking, like, kind of riffing on your last point, Adam, about like how so often. I mean, this is the big discovery I made in therapy 10 years ago. Your family dynamics, even the stuff that you know, especially the stuff you're not consciously aware of, affects your relational life. It affects the way you interact with your partners. It affects the partners you pick, and how you relate with them. And I feel like there's something about this tension between Venus and Uranus here, especially Venus ruling your relationship house, of suddenly having insight around how, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It's not always bad, but how my family ancestry, all of that is informing the way, the sort of the goggles I put on when I look for and get into intimate relationship. And then, you know, Uranus often brings you the, oh, that's it. Or, oh shit. That's kind of the more psychological angle I would go with, just riffing off your points, Adam.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, those are great follow-ups. Let's go ahead and go to Sagittarius. So for Sag, we're going to Mars turning direct, and we're also going to go to the full moon in Cancer. So the full moon in Cancer lands in your 8th house, and then shortly after, that's on the 6th, and then shortly after, around the 11th and 12th, Mars turns direct. Now, I see these two as really intimately connected for Sages. The way that I would put this is that you've been going through a process for a while that's focused on the house of love and relationships, or the social sphere of your life, how you love, who you love, maybe the kinds of conflicts that you've been having, the really important ones. Mars in the 7th, sometimes people will think, oh my God, I'm going to get in a fight with someone I love. You know, sometimes the best things that ever happen to relationships are those meaningful fights that you get in where underlying, you know, differences and different values have to come up and have to find a way of like reconciling. So whatever you've been going through in the house of love and relationships, it could also, by the way, be related to something a spouse or partner has been going through. It doesn't have to be that the relationship itself has been going through something. Sometimes a spouse is changing jobs or whatever. But this comes to me, there's something coming full circle in that house of love and relationships, but it's also tied to the things that your partner or spouse carries from their family. For example, the full moon in Cancer in the 8th is shining a big spotlight on what that person has been given for good or for bad, from their family, from their past, from their history. It's about what emotional resources they have or don't have, what they give you or what they can't give you. And it's about coming to terms with that, maybe celebrating what they can give, or maybe getting really clear. I have to be okay that they can't give me this. This is what they received growing up. This is what they didn't receive, stuff like that. And as a result of that kind of full moon shining a light on the 8th house of what the other person has, that's related to lunar things, then this turning point comes in the 7th house. So that's, to me, that's the big thing that I'm noticing. It's also about, maybe there's something there around conflicts that I could see. For example, I love you, but I can't have your parents as my in-laws. You know what I mean? Like, it could be something like that, or it could be something about feeling rejected by a spouse or partner's family, or, but I think it's family, emotional, historical, ancestral stuff, and relational stuff coming together. And it might be about who has what to give, and what you can and can't give, what's shared and what can't be shared on any level, emotionally, financially, and how that's affecting a major turning point in relationships.
So interesting, Adam. I was thinking, it kept coming to mind, the image of a ledger kept coming to mind with that full moon. And one thing I find in my practice is people who have either 8th house transits or lots of planets in the 8th house, whether they realize it or not, again, it's not always a bad thing, but they're sort of keeping track of the ledger, like what has been done, what hasn't been done, should be done, shouldn't be done. Like there's sort of an evening of the scales that's often trying to happen with that. And I'm wondering if this Mars retrograde in the 7th house for Sagittarius risings, as it completes, is a review of the way you assert yourself, or the way you take action in your communication and relationships. And in Gemini, the way you sort of you disseminate information in your relationships. Again, I think that will come back to Mercury turning, feel full force with Mercury turning direct on January 17th and 18th. But it might have something about like your ability to speak or feel like you can assert yourself, or how you do that, right? Maybe it's modified in some way around the ideas Adam was just mentioning around the moon in your 8th, the full moon in your 8th, which is this idea of like what's coming into you from your spouse, from other people, from significance, from their family, even, maybe even a previous marriage with the moon in the 8th house too.
Connected, but sort of peripherally, the Venus, well, there it is. Seriously. You know what I want really bad? I really want a sound effect where I can start playing Ode to Joy. Like as soon as the arrow comes up, Ode to Joy should just start blasting, You got
to add that to the program. I don't think you can use this program until they add the sound effects.
Exactly.
I was thinking of the Jaws theme.
Yeah, dude. Sure. That's perfect. Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, so the other thing I was going to say peripherally, you have Venus. Oh, there it's coming back. Nope. It's so funny. It's like it's got a mind of its own. I will literally change the font size, and then I'll do it, and it'll come back. It'll be like, "Screw you! I'm not going away," and you have no idea why. You don't. Maybe I'll go away next time. Maybe I won't. We'll just find out.
Tune in next week.
So, all right. So we got Venus. Well, Venus squaring Uranus from the 3rd house. It makes me wonder, with the emphasis on Cancer in the 8th too, you just think about family karma around marriage, broadly speaking, including siblings. So like, it wouldn't surprise me to see a Sag rising go through something where, for example, their partner's sister dies, or their partner's sibling goes through a divorce, or maybe your own sibling goes through a divorce. Because what you're doing is sometimes it's just like marriage, death and family karma, siblings and sudden changes, and you're just sort of putting all of them together. And it really is that simple sometimes. We overthink things instead of just letting simple associations and like keywords just sort of snap into place. So it could be that you're just seeing marriage and family karma as a big theme this month. All right, let's go on to Capricorn. So we're on our last 3 signs now. So for Capricorn, we do have the full moon on the 6th in your 7th house. And I think the other big one is going to be the Venus-Uranus dynamic, the Venus-Saturn dynamic, the new moon in the 2nd. So 7th house and 2nd house topics seem pretty important this month. I'll hand this one off to you to start with, Alex. What do you think about the connection between these 2 houses?
Well, quickly, if we're just going with some quick associations, resources, finances, and, second house is resources, but it's really, let's call it what it is. Really, we're talking about money and finances, in relationship to, kind of going through probably maybe the feeling for a need of emancipation in some way, or freedom from a way, we're talking about, I'll go to the full moon in a second, but Venus and Uranus just in dynamic, that again is like a different way you want to make money that has a more something that sort of feeds your soul, type of idea, that sort of gives you more joy, that brings you more pleasure in a sort of out of the box way, that sort of the need to feel the freedom to make the money in that way. But also, at the same time, we were talking about in the overview for the month, the full moon in Cancer being a little bit of a gut check against that intense need from Venus Uranus to be free of, does my relationship feel like it somehow becomes unstable and I need to sort of rebalance that because of those desires? Does it feel like I need to sort of recheck my feeling of stability and care and nurturance, whatever it is, around my primary intimate relationships, or how I get into primary or intimate relationships, that has something to do with that freedom dynamic that's being called for intensely by Venus Uranus as we go through the month.
Yeah. I thought, here's some images that popped in my head. I'm going to start an Etsy shop, right? And then your spouse is like, no, you're not. We have bills to pay. You make a good living, and you're not just going to leave your job, right? It's like Venus in the 2nd house wants to do something, like you said, like a new, interesting way of, let's say, making money. But the reality is that you have a family that needs you. You have a spouse. You have obligations that may somehow check the personal growth or change that you're trying to embody somehow, which likely has either a financial or professional or creative dimension to it. But there's, what will their family think? What will my spouse think? What will my family think? There's some social, emotional, and maybe regressive pull that's rooted in other people, or I would say family dynamics, again with the Cancer full moon, that's trying to either check something that's unrealistic, or maybe prohibit something that needs to be free. And so you have to like work through that challenge somehow. Though that's what I would say. I mean, the other thing that comes to my mind, I guess, would be some kind of so like the image of people going through a divorce and in mediation, reaching an agreement to divide assets. So it's like this moment of karmic breakthrough around things and people that you're bonded to, and separating things that have been joined. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally. Totally. Yeah. So I think that full moon in Cancer may feel a little annoying to the Venus-Uranus dynamic, because it'll feel like it's coming from other people, but it's something to listen to.
Yeah,
that's my
a good
intuition
point
on that too. It's something to listen to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is something. It like as a Cancer myself, sometimes as Cancers, I think we can feel like we're the only ones looking out for your best interest here, Yeah. and sometimes you do need to listen to the Cancers in your life who are like, you're leaking life force energy because you're not being good to yourself. Like,
Right.
Cancers are often really aware of that. The sneaky thing about Cancers, though, is that, you have to be careful with what a Cancer is trying to provide you with, like, let me just help you with this, is often really about something that they're giving themselves. You know, it's like a mom, you know, I remember the point in high school where my mom would be like, well, don't you just want to stay in and let me do X, Y, and Z, which she knew were like my favorite food or, you know, something. And I'd be like, I see your tricks, lady. You know, I'm 15 now. Screw you, you know? So
no, I want to go out and smoke a joint with my friends. Make me dinner tomorrow.
Yeah,
emotional police.
Yeah. I feel like my greatest weapon is my guilt trip I feel like that's going to be like, I'm really with my kids anyway, you know, like as a parent, like I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good with the guilt trip weapon. I've got that. I think it's a Cancer thing.
Yeah. I've seen that with a friend, a couple I know downtown who one's a Cancer, and I've seen that come out. It's amazing. It's like, okay.
Dude. Okay. So my grandma was born on July 16th, which is, I was also born on July 16th. So I was born on my grandmother's birthday. And it's just so funny, the difference between, well, she has a lot of differences in her chart too. But when I was visiting my grandparents one summer with my buddy, we went home and like, they had a really cool place because they had like 80 acres of land, and they were like old school, you know, and they had like a cabin in the back 40 acres. And my friend and I would stay out in the cabin, and we could basically do what we wanted, which is why we went there during the summer, you know. So my parents, they were very loose in terms of what we did. So one night we go out and my grandma says, be back for dinner at like 5:30 or whatever. And this is like, every time that I think of her as a Cancer, I think of this moment. We came back at 6. We were just late. We walk into the kitchen and she was standing there, you know. It was like summer, and you know, it was like, you know, sun had set or whatever, and it was setting, you know. It was just this picture perfect scene. And she looked like, you know, like someone might as well been Little House on the Prairie, and someone had like burned down her cabin, raped all of her daughters, like killed her husband. She just was like completely devastated, covered in tears. And it was all because we were 30 minutes late for dinner.
Right.
And I couldn't believe it. I didn't. And I was about 15 or 16 or whatever, you know, and I was like, oh my God, this is like the worst thing. She didn't have to say a word. She just, and she said something like, I hope you're still hungry. You know, it was like that. Just like, oh my God.
Think your dinner may be warm. Maybe. I don't know. You might catch pneumonia now that you're eating cold food, but what can I do?
Exactly.
I'm Sicilian. I know this routine really well. I know how to do this. Oh I'm not even a Cancer. I'm just Italian. But that's a great image. That's such a great Cancer image too, Adam.
Yeah, I know. All right. So Aquarius rising. We're going to get through this. How about the Venus in your first house, Venus conjoining Saturn, Venus squaring Uranus, the new moon in your first house? It's all about the first house this month for Aquarians. Maybe the first and the fourth connected. Let's start there. What do you think, Alex?
You know, I think if we're going back to this idea of how the house, I'm looking at like the first house exerting by superior position to the fourth house, your sense of self, which, you know, for an Aquarius, it depends on factors in the chart, but usually Aquarians are sort of like I'm good with who I am as my individual, amazing, crazy, eclectic self. And I mean that in the best sense of the word. That may start becoming into, you know, I think with Uranus in the fourth house, something about like something being sparked or desire for someone in the family, or freedom from family karma, or freedom, someone in your family, maybe dad, your father, or something related to father, primary paternal caregiver, about some revolution they go through that you're helping to bring to them by your influence of just being the unique sense of self that you are. That's where I can bring that one right now. It's a really, I think it's interesting with the first house now exerting its sort of influence on the fourth for Aquarius risings.
Yeah, I would see this as being like the need to individuate relative to your family of origin. Um, you know, like big time, like I am not my mom, I'm not my dad, or I'm realizing for the first time that I am something that they are or that they gave me that I had previously rejected. But it's a critical turning point in terms of your self-concept and its relation to how you were raised, either in all the great ways or all the terrible ways, or you know, some mixture of the two. It's something about a new beginning relative to where you're living. You know, it's like I'm changing and so I'm moving, or could be something about what provides you with a stable sense of identity and psychic security or groundedness.
Mm-hmm.
And this may be a month where the way that you create that sense of security for yourself is going through an adjustment. So it may actually be not the most stable period, right? Because especially with Venus square Uranus, you don't exactly see a stable picture. But you know, it's like moving. Moving is one of the most stressful things, I think. For it was like a list, and it was like, you know, this, and at the top of the list for things that stress people out the most was moving.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes psychically we move. We don't. Sometimes it's a physical move with a connection between the first and the fourth, like this. But other times it's a psychic. It's like you're changing residence psychically somehow, and
Mm-hmm.
that can be there can be something very destabilizing about that. For example, I have noticed that many times when you see something like this, a first fourth house square, especially with Venus in the first, and around the new year, of course, people will diet. They'll go to the gym. And if you this is a real thing, it's called newbie gains. And they talk about this in gym culture a lot. People go to the gym, and if they hit it hard and they hit their diet right, like they're counting their macros or whatever, and they hit their diet right and they're, you know, working out regularly, let's say 5 days a week, you'll see a lot of gains really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning you'll
Mm-hmm.
burn a lot of fat off, your body fat percentage will drop, you'll put on muscle. And as someone who's gone through a little bit of that, not that I'm like anything special, but just that I've gone through something like that myself, um, you have to adjust your whole sense of who you are rather quickly. And even though you're excited about it, it's still a holy shit moment because you physically transformed very quickly, and a lot of psychic weight may be dropped really quickly. And even though that's positive and liberating, it can still spin you out. It's very similar to like, you know, in yoga, you know this too. You want to be careful telling students of yoga not to go on really intense elimination cleanses or diets where they only drink juice for 20 days or something. One of the reasons being that there's just a really high percentage or a really high rate of people who will you know, swing in the opposite direction right afterward and then feel
Yeah.
worse than they did to begin with. So I think you have to be a little bit careful of those extremes if you're an Aquarius this month, in terms of a powerful positive breakthrough personally, psychologically, maybe related to home or family or just your psychic roots. Looks good, but it could be a little destabilizing as well, and you want to be careful that it doesn't turn into like a seesaw type of thing of extremes, I would think.
That's awesome, Adam. I love that. You know, just to riff off that as we're is to say, you know, sometimes with Uranus in the fourth house, that's revelations or a sudden understanding about your family that, you know, I found this as I get older, like things I thought were true, I discover really weren't true, or things I had thought were the way they were in my story or narrative of my family actually weren't true. And it does take a minute to sort of like tailor the new psychic or the identity that you wear to now conform to the truths that you've learned. Um, the sort of like you have to go to the tailor in your psyche and have the suit that you wear, your identity retailored, because you have, for Aquarius risings, I can see that being something maybe that you discover or is suddenly revealed, or sudden insight you get that relates back to your ancestry, which
Yeah.
forms so much of our identity without really realizing it. It does.
You know, I thought this comment was interesting, Alex, which is this person said, I need to be more present at home. You know, for an Aquarius, the breakthrough sometimes is the breakthrough very well could be that you feel more grounded or present, because sometimes Aquarians or any air sign can just live in the mind a little bit more. Just, and not that sometimes people will say, oh, it's like air signs are dissociated. And I think that's not really the right description most of the time. Um, they have an active life of the mind, and
Mhm.
And that's a whole world. And it's just as grounded to be, it's not like ungrounded for a bird to be in the sky. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So,
It's natural. Yeah.
but it could be that there's something more earthy that's suddenly pulling you in a different direction than you're used to, which is why I thought that comment about being more present at home coming up while we were talking about this is interesting.
I think so too. And I think, since Venus is involved here, it's Venus's sign that Uranus is in. Venus is in your first house. One thing I found that really cuts an Aquarius deeply, and I've seen this in my practice, I've seen with friends who are Aquarians, they're often really trying to help. They're really trying to offer something that will be of benefit and be of benefit to a whole, but it can come across without realizing it as the cerebral detached Saturn, as like, well, we're just going to do this and this is the way. And but they're trying to help. And when they get feedback sometimes that they're being distant or cold, they're like, I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to bring this in. And I think that like Venus there, it's in Venus' sign. I think, Uranus and Venus' sign, there's something about the quality of the goddess coming into this that I think is going to be really, really helpful if that's something that's going on.
Yeah, that's well said. I like that. As a family, as my family has a bunch of Aquarians in it, I'm just trying to help here. You know that thing?
Yeah.
That was a big thing for me over Christmas, believe it or not, was some very, very helpful but very unsolicited Aquarian thoughts. So anyway,
yes.
But that's whatever. That's the holiday too, I feel like, for everyone. Okay, so for Pisces, always our last but not
we got to you, Pisces. We got to you.
Here. We made it.
We love you.
Twin peaks and short teachers and all sorts of things. So Venus going through a 12th house trial for Pisceans, but ending up exalted by the end of the month in your home sign. Going through a trial in the 12th house, square to Uranus, conjoined Saturn, new moon in the 12th house. But then at the end of the month, Venus goes into her exaltation in your home sign. To me, this looks like I could see it going one of two ways. One, looking at things that are repressed, specifically Venusian things, what you love, what you crave, what brings you happiness or pleasure, who you love, how you love, relationship dynamics, sex and romance and physical things, and looking at the ways in which those things are problematic, maybe locked up and repressed, maybe you're going to an extreme, drinking, spending too much, maybe your sex drive is out of control. I mean, it could be something like overindulgent or something locked up and repressed. I think those would probably be the two extremes in the 12th house. You have people there, for example, who are traumatized, and like a 12th house Venus transit can be about dealing with childhood sexual abuse. Or on the other hand, it could be about dealing with someone who has a sex addiction, right? It can go like either extreme. So I think you're dealing with Venusian wounds and stuff that's in the unconscious that is of the nature of Venus. There's some breakthroughs, there's some challenges, there's some trials. But by the end, Venus moving into your first house, to me, suggests that you are coming to a healthy, happy, more integrated, aware, and maybe even a healed kind of place. Does that make sense, Alex?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I'm kind of going to work backwards a little bit here from that. But Venus, when Venus is exalted, or any planet is exalted, it's sort of, Adam, you describe it often in class like being held up, right? It's being put on high. There's something about these trials, or, as Adam was just describing, is that when you get to Venus and Pisces in the first house, there's something where you're able to sort of, your full glory comes onto display. There's something that had been, the 12th house is interesting. And this is where, in Adam's class, what I always love is we're going on how the houses work astronomically. The 12th house is a blind spot to the self. It's hard for us to see what's going on in the 12th house. And oftentimes there's something where if you're working through those repression dynamics or something that maybe is overindulgent, if you can dig down to what's my blind spot here? Do I have a blind spot about how something deeper going on that may be causing these behaviors, these thoughts, these actions, these ideas to come to the surface? That when the 12th house stuff, I find often when it's sort of addressed and seen, and sometimes we need some help to see it, when you get to Venus moving into Pisces, there's a little bit like a reinvented, exalted, Botticelli Venus comes out of the shell, so to speak, and is like, here I am in a refreshed, held up form, supported form.
There's a question for you.
No, I am not familiar with. No, I'm not. I know a couple of more Italian Amorosis, one of whom was a pop singer, Vanessa Amorosi, who's I'm. But,
okay.
No, thank you for that.
Yeah, I wanted to hear your answer to that one, so I popped it up. Well, I really appreciate what you added in there. And the other thing that I guess I would point to would be fears, like you were saying, kind of like inhibitions and fears. One of the things that's interesting about Venus hitting Uranus in the third house is that sometimes when there's a 12th house, third house square, you'll see that someone's unconscious baggage, whatever it is, they're trying to let go of something they're doing too much. They need to do more of something they're doing too little of. But it's a blind spot. But the connection to why it's happening or why they're stuck is contained in an influence that's coming from the environment. And that's the third house. And the trigger of the square between the 12th and the 3rd will make someone aware of what it is or who it is in the environment that is at least related to or influencing this thing that's stuck. For example, let's give a simple example in my life. I had a 12th house, 3rd house dynamic when a transit that was very important to me when I was dealing with opiate addiction in my early 20s. And the 12th house, 3rd house connection was quite clearly when I started having a transit through the 12th impacting planets in my 3rd house. I became aware of the fact that it was the restaurant industry itself, as well as the specific restaurant and the staff that I was working with, that were a huge influence upon drinking and doing drugs all the time. Because that's what everyone did after their shift was over, basically. That was a 12th house, 3rd house transit. And I have a Mercury and the sun in the 3rd house. Anyway, so, and at any rate, my point is that Venus going through the 12th house and hitting the square to Uranus in the 3rd for Pisceans, just don't be surprised if whatever the unconscious dynamic is that you're unpacking, which really does look like it's in a much better spot by the end of the month with Venus moving into her exaltation in your 1st house. But just note that someone or something in the environment could be a part of the issue. And maybe a part of the answer or the solution or the breakthrough. But watch for things in the environment around you as well.
It's so interesting in the 3rd house being the joy of the moon, and then it's the environment atom too. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Eureka. Yeah. Eureka. Well, I'm glad that a few people seem to find that little piece about the 3rd, 12th, helpful. Well, we made it. We got through. This has been a 3-hour live stream where we did the astrology of the month ahead, and we did horoscopes and everything. Alex, thank you so much for being here and just putting in the time to help me with the Kickstarter. You've been just super, super helpful. Don't forget, everybody, as we end here, today is brought to you on part of we still need about 500 backers. So we are doing this in part as a way of saying thank you to everybody, and please do support the Kickstarter. You'll find the link in the description of this video. You will find the link in the live stream right there. If you go to my website, nightlightastrology.com, you can find the link to the Kickstarter at the top of the nightlightastrology.com homepage. There's a link to it. If you want to look at the classes we have on sale and check out what they're all about, check out the course pages. Every one of those classes is 50% off. If you bundle them together, it's more. Come study astrology. It's an amazing thing. If you're someone who listens to astrology a lot, taking a class, especially one you can do at your own pace where there's no pressure to, you can take it as quickly or as slowly as you want. It is an incredible way to deepen your connection to astrology. In my experience, astrology, once you commit a little bit more time, even if it's just going to be a hobby, it changes your life. It's a very powerful, healing subject to learn about. So I really encourage all of you to think about coming and studying, taking advantage of the the program discounts through the Kickstarter, helping us reach our goal to build a donation-based reading clinic so that people who can't afford readings have a service available to them. Thank you again, Alex, for being here. If you want to find more about Alex and his fantastic work, you can find him at alexamorosi.com or on Instagram, Alex Amorosi Healing. And he does really fun Instagram videos on astrology all the time as well. So you can check him out there.
You will see the Leo rising come out on my Instagram. That is where Leo rising is, out there.
Dude, what's the degree of your ascendant?
15.
Yeah, I thought so. I was like, because my natal ascendant ruler is Venus in Leo, and I have so many friends where the vibe that I share with a lot of my close friends and colleagues too, it seems to constellate around, my natal Venus in Leo being like close to your ascendant or on like a planet in Leo that you have or something. Like a lot of my best friend growing up, his moon is on my Venus, right? So I don't know. I always have like all a lot of my tight friends have Leo planets. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I always enjoy this, Adam. Thank you for having me to do this. And I'm happy I was able to support this for you because you just do such amazing work. And I think we all just appreciate it so much.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah. Appreciate you. You guys all have a great rest of your day. We will see you again tomorrow with more content. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Take it easy, everyone. Thanks, Alex.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.